was broken and screwed up and needed fixing, and I tried to find some people to fix me, and nobody could. When I got done with the EMDR training, I did it with a very intense instructor. So I heard of EMDR, and I made the mistake of looking it up on YouTube. And it was this weird hippie lady waving her hand in front of somebody and like asking if they feel better. And I'm like, that's stupid. That's stupid. No, most of it's flannel shirts.
Yeah.
There's a lot of 9/11s and car crashes and shootings and kids lost and kids hurt. There's a lot of flannel shirts, man. A lot.
What we call our tribe. We have an intentional community, and we have multiple intentional communities of believers that all, and the big things all believe the same. It's like, I gotta take a little bit of me time to make sure that I'm good so that I can then be good for everybody else.
The fact that you could point out where people were and like, not good, dead, not good, and how many people I had, he's like, that took care of triage for me. Like, I still had to do the medical part of it. He's like, but that told me, we need 4 more ambulances.
Right.
We need more of their interstate blocked off. We need more people here. We need more assets to this. He's like, dude, you have no idea how helpful that was. We were very poor. I mean, we lived behind a strip club in the ghetto of East Fort Worth. I have some crazy memories of learning what fishnet stockings were. My wife said, hey, what did he hit you with? Like, we're not the police. What did he hit you with? Like brass knuckles? Or No, he bit my head off.
Holy shit.
Yes.
What's up, guys? This is the Bear Independent Podcast. We tried to come up with a cool name, and we haven't yet, so subject to change at any time. Who cares? I'm Bear from the internet. This is a dear friend of mine and our guest for 001, Dr. Trevor Wilkins.
Honored.
Yeah.
One.
And I don't think most people, so some people in the Bear Nation know that we know each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people on your side, because you do socials as well, right? But I don't think people actually understand that, like, we're homies.
Yep.
That we like text each other and we F with each other constantly.
For a long time.
Talk shit on each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like he's actually one of my best friends. Like we actually hang out. We actually enjoy each other's company. And you're in town from Kentucky, and you would have been here. You've been here for days, but today is the first time we got to hang out because my family decided to contract COVID-19, and you refused.
Whatever.
Yeah, you refuse to let me lick your face. So
I think that is something from your part of the world, not from Kentucky.
yeah, it's an ancient tradition of my elders.
Okay.
We just shalom, welcome.
Explains a lot.
We're weird.
Explains a lot.
So for the people who live under a rock who don't know who you are you? What do you do?
Yeah, so as you said, Dr. Trevor Wilkins, the fact that I say doctor in front of my name now is really weird because as people may hear, I was just supposed to be a cop.
Yeah.
So, the fact that the title is different is a little weird to me, something I never knew I'd achieve. So who I am, what I really do professionally is I'm a licensed psychotherapist. There's different names for the psychology world, psychologist, psychiatrist. I'm a licensed therapist. And I primarily treat PTSD, complex PTSD, anger, adults with childhood trauma is one of my specialties, which has a interesting storyline of how I got to that specialty. I'm sure we can jump into if you want, but I did that because I was in law enforcement for 15 years, uniform law enforcement, was with law enforcement for 18 years, did some dispatching before that, and before that I was an EMT, so about 20 years of public service, and it did not end well for me.
Yeah.
It ended not the way I wanted to be. All I wanted to be was like a captain by 40 and ride off into the sunset in retirement one day. And it did not turn out that way. And really, the long story of it short is I was broken and screwed up and needed fixing. And I tried to find some people to fix me, and nobody could.
Yeah.
What I would later learn is kind of part of the downfall of mental health, professional mental health services. And so I went to school, honestly, just to figure out what was wrong with me, try to fix my family, try to fix me, and it turned into a really cool career.
It's one of the things that I love about you was that you fixed yourself first, right? Which is an ongoing process. It's not a one and done, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot like faith. It's not destination faith. It's not a one and done. It's the beginning of a lifelong journey. But when we first met and I first heard your testimony, your story of how you got here, I had so much respect for you because it's like you knew you had to do something. And whenever you sought professional help, and they were basically that, by the way, this is going to be an R-rated conversation.
Is,
a lot of people
Yeah.
know better from the internet. Grandmas and children watch this show. Not recommended because I don't want to censor myself at all on this show, and so I'm not going to. You were fucked.
Yeah.
And you had professional therapists telling you were fucked.
Yep.
And you're like, no, there's got to be a way. And you figured it out for you and then took that and then have been able to pour into other people and help other people. And I adore that about you. I respect the hell out of that about you because it's so freaking genuine in a world full of fake people and, you know, self-help gurus and get-rich-quick entrepreneurs and these people that have no backstory, they have no reason to be telling anybody what to do. You set out to, like, you got to fix your head. You have to fix your relationship with your wife, your relationship with your kids, and then lessons learned to help other people. You know, you said specifically you deal a lot with PTSD, complex PTSD, a lot of military law enforcement, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And that's like 100% needed in the world that we have today. We have about 20 years of GWAT, about 5 million GWAT vets. A lot of people lacking purpose and mission and fulfillment. And I can't say enough good things about you and what you do.
I appreciate it. Well, and I think that's why we get along so well is because your journey of which I know because I'm your friend.
Yep.
Your journey of figure it out, do it anyway. You know, whether it be previous careers, whether it be drumming, whether it be refuge, whether it be Caleb House, this has to be done. I'm going to go do it.
Yep.
So that's the kind of people that I find myself looking up to, being around, learning from, and the people that you and I probably tend to attract are those people.
Yeah, bootstrappers. Yeah, like you didn't set out to get a fancy piece of paper on the wall. That came as a byproduct.
Yeah,
right?
in fact, I was reminded the other day, it stayed in the box for like 4 years. Like, the only reason it's hung up in my office at all is because I have zero design ability. Like this is way above my level.
Right.
So I had a designer come in once I started making a little bit of profit and just redo the office, make it not look like a dude, just put a couple chairs in there. And in fact, my first office, there was 2 chairs that I borrowed from my parents, 2 leather chairs. They were nice, but they were old and not comfortable, you know, for 8 hours of doing therapy a day. And I had a coffee table in between the 2, and there was a throw over the coffee table. Not because I'm fancy, but because there were beer ring stains all over the coffee table from my college days. That was my first. So, yeah, I mean, it's bootstrapping people. It's like you said. I went to a couple of therapists. The first lady literally cried when I talked to her. It's okay to show empathy with your clients, you know, but. The second guy said that my anger and my trauma were so bad he didn't know what to do or where to send me. So that would actually end up being strike 3. You know, of me trying to work with therapists. And the first one wasn't necessarily his fault. He was kind of handcuffed to what he could or couldn't do. But yeah, strike 3 coming from a guy that's not going to talk to therapists. So strike 3 is all it takes.
Well, and I think it's worth pointing out you're big jacked, you know, the angry Viking therapist, right? Like I'm me, not as jacked as I used to be, working on it. We're both covered in tats, right? Like we both had like, dude, mud and blood is just like what I grew up in, right?
Yeah.
You know, 20 years of public service.
Yep.
The idea of talking to a therapist, just that phrase, like that is so taboo. I would never do that, but it's actually the reason I'm still sitting here right now. Because after I had met you introduced me to the concept of EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprogramming. Reprocessing.
You say it that way all the time. It's actually not a bad way to say it.
Okay, reprocessing.
Yeah, you're good.
Copy.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm not a doctor. I don't know if you know that. I just play one on YouTube. But
enough school loans, anybody can do it.
But I didn't know what EMDR was, and I found myself in a really dark place yet again. And I've struggled with depression my whole life, and for good reason at times. But I'm also, I don't know, I've never been tested for it because I just don't care. But I know, like, my mom has clinical depression, like chemical depression. It runs on that side of the family.
Yeah.
Well, I was having one of those days where a Glock just looked really tasty, like really tasty. And I was literally in my office. I had all the lights out, and I was laying on this futon thing in the office. And I had Glock 17, and I had it right on my hip. And I was like, man, today might be the day. And instead, I Googled EMDR in my zip code. And there turned out to be a guy a few towns over. And I called him up. I said, hey, I need to make an appointment. And he's like, okay, how about next Tuesday? I was like, how about right the fuck right now? And he was like, oh, it's one of those. I was like, it is all the way one of those.
Wow.
And so I went in there. I talked to that guy. And first session was talk therapy, which was good. I needed it. He was like, hey, what's going on? He said, let me explain EMDR to you. And sat down, second session. And even that process, that whole process, one of the things that this doc was so good, like it was totally the hand of the Father that this guy happened to be right there and have availability that day. And it was amazing.
A specialized person in effectively middle of nowhere.
100%. Yeah. We don't live in a big city. Right. And so that he was there at that time, totally the hand of the Father. And he retired soon after I finished therapy with him. So yeah, like no coincidences. We still text occasionally.
Yeah, good.
But we sit down the first time, and he said, okay, I need you to make a safe space in your mind that you can go to if things get too intense during the therapy. You can just go back there and chill out. I was like, okay. And he's like, what do you see? I said, I see a cabin in the woods. He's like, okay, describe it to me. I said, there's smoke coming out of the chimney. And he's like, okay, good. What are you doing? I said, I'm cutting firewood. He goes, you can't cut firewood. I was like, no, I'm cutting firewood. I have to cut firewood because we need wood for the chimney to like stay warm. And he's you can't work at your safe space. I said, why can't I? And he goes, you're a workaholic, aren't you? I'm like, yes, I am absolutely a workaholic.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct. Nailed it. I'm cutting firewood in my safe space. He's like, all right, take me inside, explain it to me. And I said, well, there's a bed and a chair and a table. And he goes, what does the bed look like? I said, it's a bed. And he goes, well, what do the bedclothes look like? Sheets and all that. He said, light suggestions. He's like, maybe they're flannel. And I was like, no, not flannel. And he's like, oh, unpack that for me. And just all these little speed bumps on the road of life. I had forgotten. I had a deep-seated, like, avoidance is one of the things you talk about with PTSD, right? Yeah. I had a deep-seated hatred for red and black flannel, and I didn't know why. And the answer is because when I was younger, I had bought myself a winter coat that I needed. I'd talk about bootstrapping. My first business was a $500 pickup truck, a $200 chainsaw. Yep. Right? Cutting firewood. And it gets cold in upstate New York, so I bought myself a Carhartt winter jacket that was flannel lined. And I never got to wear it because my dad took it from me. I made it his jacket. And that pissed me off so much. I had taken that memory, put it all the way over here, forgotten that existed, but I avoided with a hatred red and black flannel for the remainder of my life from there up until that moment. And I was like, oh. I was like, there's a lot of stuff in here to unpack, Doc. And he's like, yeah, there is. But all that to say, like EMDR is that thing. I wouldn't have even known that it existed had I not met you. And for just a handful of sessions for me, and I know it's different for everybody. Sure. But it actually allowed me to unpack a whole bunch of things that were legitimate traumas, not just having my coat stolen, but big T trauma, as you call it, to the point where it's like, hey, this sucks. Okay. I don't have to relive it like it's happening right now. Every time I think about it, I can create some distance, and now it's just a thing that happened. Yeah. It's not a stumbling block anymore. It's just part of my testimony. And so that's another thing that I'm thankful for, getting to know you, because I wouldn't have known that was even an option to me.
It's a cool, as friends as we are, and of course I've never asked because, we're the kind of guys, I want you to know something, I'll tell you, or I'll ask, right? Or I'll ask. So we've never actually talked about how the sessions went. You said they were successful and went well and changed a lot of things, I know. But it's interesting to hear you talk about that for two reasons. One, kind of the flannel thing I want to come back to, but you probably don't know this or probably never thought about it. There was a time shortly after that I was like, man, I should have gone and done EMDR with him. Like I'm his guy, man. Like I should have gone and done that. And it wasn't like a horrible, massive regret or anything like that. I was just like, man, because you and I are the kind of guys, going back to what we said earlier, is like, no, I'll just go do it.
Yep.
Like, oh, you need this made?
Yep.
I'll figure it out. Let me know. Oh, I need to figure out how to do an online selling program for these. I'll figure it out.
Yep.
You know, oh, I need to figure out what's going on in the neurology of the brain that I didn't learn in college. I'll figure it out.
Yep.
I'll start, right? So there's not a massive regret or anything, but I remember thinking like, dang, I should have gone and done it. I should have gone for a couple days, trying to knock it out or whatever. Of course, we were still fairly new, you know, to each other. So I'm glad I still would have liked to have done it. I'm glad I didn't, because I also like knowing, even though you and I always speak really honest with each other, I think that there is somebody else that you can say some of those things that maybe you wouldn't say to a friend, even though we're very honest with each other.
Yep.
But there's just a little piece of like, I don't think I want to unpack that one with somebody that I'm going to see again.
Yeah,
you know?
I think there's maybe the over familiarity.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
do I really want to share this with my bro? And then
Right.
he's going to know, and then he's going to judge me.
Even if he's cool with it, even if he
Right.
doesn't care or would never say anything.
Right.
And where I run into this often, that's why I thought of it was, you know, there's no specific ethic rules about you can't see somebody you know, but it's definitely discouraged. Definitely if you have business associates with them or some kind of dual relationship, you shouldn't. But the trick in my world is where I see a lot of public safety and military. Public safety is the world I come from.
Right.
I still live in the area that I was public safety. They want to talk to me because I know what they went through, or at least have a borrowed credit, as I like to say, about what they've gone through. I have to see people I know.
Yeah.
You know, if I turned away everybody that I'd ever heard their name of before,
Right.
nobody
no
would
clients.
be there. Yeah. And it goes back to even more of a serious thing before the flannel, getting back to the flannel thing, which is interesting, but it goes back to even more serious thing. When we get out of graduate school, we do a two years under somebody else, whether it's a residency in some states, it's like an internship in other states, or provisional license time. You have to work under somebody for a couple of years, and it's usually a crappy job with crappy pay. You know, they know they got you. And I worked in one of those places whose name I will never say. You know, I worked in one of those places. But we did in school and in-home therapy, and you're under supervision, right? So at that level, if somebody even remotely mentions self-harm, wanting to take their life, having a plan, you know, the things that you've heard. Do you have a plan? Do you have opportunity and means to do it? If any of that is mentioned, you have to call your supervisor.
Right.
Which I'm not against maybe getting a second opinion, but in a lot of mental health world today, it just takes one of those to set off all the alarm bells, right? I had this girl, middle school age, we'll say, and I was like her third therapist. She would talk to anybody, and we just hit it off. I don't know what it was. I don't know. I was just different, or she just, I don't know. But we hit it off really well. And about the third session, she came in. She talked about something that was really bothering her, some recent trauma that was upsetting. And she said, I'll be honest with you. I feel like I can tell you about 2 weeks ago, like I thought about taking a bunch of meds and, you know, not being here anymore. Oh, okay, we'll deal with it, but I got to call. Well, 3 hours later, the mobile assessments come out, which, by the way, cleared her because she wasn't suicidal.
Right.
Parents have to come to the school. They're pissed off at me. She's pissed off at me. Guess who's never going to talk to me again, right? So I think that all ties back into, there's a whole nother discussion about how that's handled in the mental health world, but I think that all ties back into, I'm actually glad I don't know everything about my buddy.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't want you to know everything about me. You know, I don't purposefully try to do stupid things, but I don't want you to know every detail that it goes through my head. In fact, I tell people regularly, like, man, if you knew what I went through my head sometimes, you would not ask advice from me. You know, like, hopefully I'm gaining ground. You know, my learning curve is going upwards, I hope, instead of plateauing or falling. But the flannel thing's really interesting in that when I started doing therapy, and I did therapy for a couple of years before I even dealt with EMDR.
Yep.
And the caveat of that is EMDR doesn't fix everything, although some people think it does. A lot of therapists thinks it does. But anyway, that's a whole nother hour podcast. But when I got done with the EMDR training, I did it with a very intense instructor. So I'd heard of EMDR, and I made the mistake of looking it up on YouTube, and it was this weird hippie lady waving her hand in front of somebody and like asking them if they feel better. And I'm like, that's stupid. That's stupid. I'll never do that. I was actually antagonistic about it. People would call me, hey, it says here you're a trauma specialist. Do you do EMDR? And I'm like, absolutely not. Come do some real therapy.
Go to a drum circle.
Yeah, exactly what I felt like. Just go cry and somebody wave their hand in front of you, right? I went to a conference about 6 months later and watched it used. And watched it used on a legitimate patient that I knew his backstory, that he'd been suffering for 16 years with an event that he showed up on. I mean, really suffering, hiding it, packing away every day, but really suffering. And in 30 minutes, it had done what takes me 3 months to do with people.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I'll at least invest the time into seeing what it's all about. So fortunately for me, I found a longtime mentor who was a colonel in the Army. He was enlisted in Vietnam.
Okay.
Got out, came back as an officer, made it all the way to colonel, retired. Now all he did was literally his company was called the Soldier Center. That doesn't tell you what he works with, right? He's right outside Fort Campbell. In my opinion, probably one of the best trauma therapists that ever lived. In fact, the year that Francine Shapiro died, who created EMDR, they created a Francine Shapiro, something like a Lifetime Achievement Award. He was the first recipient. Wow. He had been around it so long and made so many innovations. And
what was his name?
Dr. E.C. Hurley.
Yep.
Yeah, he just passed away about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago.
Yep. I remember when he passed.
Oh, man. Yeah. It was devastating. And the worst part is I found out through an obituary.
Yeah.
I had a meeting with him next week, next week. And he lived about 3 hours from me. And I had a meeting with him next week because he was helping me with getting my consultation license.
Yep.
And, God, man, just never know. This guy he'd be in his 80s, run, well, it's easy to run faster than me, but run faster than anybody. I mean, he just still doing it, doing Army Colonel stuff, But because he was that mentality, I could understand what he was saying. I could understand how do we approach this not from this holistic's okay, but like overly holistic, nice. Yeah, like I can't do it. All encompassing is good. Thinking yourself better doesn't necessarily work, right?
Yeah.
So, or getting rid of all the adversity in your life doesn't really work. That's not real. So he approached it from this hardcore Army way,
right?
This and Vietnam Army way, right? Old school guy. So that changed my opinion. And I was going to say, when I got out of there, I thought I'd be doing just like trauma, 9/11 car crashes, stabbings,
Right.
No, most of it's flannel shirts, like there's a lot of 9/11s and car crashes and shootings and kids lost and kids hurt. There's a lot of flannel shirts, man, a lot,
That's crazy.
Yeah. And it's because, as you said, like, that's not the worst thing that ever happened in your life. You probably, even if you remembered it before then, looked back as like, Dad's a dick. That's a dick thing to do, as opposed to like, oh, this changed my life forever. This set me down the path of, but the reality is when you're young, and young means different things for different people because some of us had to grow up faster than others. But when you're young, your brain takes all that into account of what the world's really like.
Yep.
Right. And even if it wasn't physically dangerous, which I know would be a part of your life, even if that wasn't physically dangerous, the brain still goes, well, that's one piece of bullcrap I can't deal with.
Yeah, I wonder if it was like the straw that broke the camel's back almost.
Could be.
Because like physical danger in my household was just something I grew up with.
Right.
Right. And it's only because of the grace of the Most High that later in life I was able to have a relationship with my dad at all, which is a whole nother conversation.
Man, I have a great conversation you and I had about that one day.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
But I mean, it's just all the Father. And my dad has passed now. And it's interesting, when he passed, I realized that I mourned the loss of a potential wonderful relationship with him more than I mourned the loss of him.
Yeah.
And that was a shitty feeling to have.
Yeah.
Because, like, I still missed him. I still miss him. But I miss more so what could have been.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
So...
Well,
But
it feels like a lot of wasted time. You know, when you
Yeah.
become an adult and you have kids and your world is this much bigger,
Yeah.
you know, than like obviously mistreatment early, obviously I got to get out of here, obviously I can't live this way, I'll never do this to
Yep.
somebody. But then you start having these kids that smile at you and, you know, like
Yep.
I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but Dudley, your tech guy that we all know too well, like he named one of his kids after an object because it looked like an object in his hands, if I remember the story correctly, right?
Yeah.
Or that's the nickname for him, right?
Yep.
So like that the reason I said that is that life becomes a little different then.
Yep.
I'm not the guy that looked at my first kid and thought, oh my gosh, everything's different now.
Yep.
I looked at my first kid and thought, I got to figure out how to do this. I don't even know how to change a diaper,
So
you know?
when I met my wife and my two oldest kids at the same time.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
So my two oldest kids are from my wife's first marriage, and they're all the way my children. Right?
Yeah.
Like they are my kids. I'm their dad. They're my
believe it.
kids,
Yep.
and everybody knows this, right? And so I went from single guy to husband and father like that
Yeah.
quick, right? And I was like, I
What a
gotta
jump.
I
Yeah,
gotta
yeah.
figure this shit out like ASAP. Like this is a whole different world than I was planning for, but there was like this latent facet of my existence that I was completely unaware of. That it was like some of my genes and my DNA switched on
Yeah.
instantly. I was like, oh, dad stuff. And what was super cool for me was I thought that I was a fully actualized male until like did bar fights and climbing towers and running chainsaws and operating heavy equipment. And then you have this kid that's in diapers and is like trying to stick a key in the electrical socket on the wall, and it's like, I must protect. I love this thing.
Right.
I don't know why I love this thing, but I love this thing.
Yeah.
I will kill hordes of invading armies to protect this thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I didn't even know that existed, and that was a weird compare contrast for me to feel all those things, to have those deep convictions, and also to have had the upbringing that I had, and mindset. Right. One of the biggest blessings for me was being able to have the self-awareness to understand that even if I had a shitty upbringing, there were still lessons in it. I might not have learned what to do, but I learned a lot of what not to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to repeat those things that didn't work.
Yeah.
And that for me is actually how I've done most of my learning in my life. The only way I know what works is because I know 1,000 ways that don't work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So.
Well, and you know, right before talking about the kids thing and how we kind of how that all kind of starts to materialize, you see things there. You're talking about the it wasn't the loss of what you had, because what you had wasn't great.
Yeah.
There were times that were good. There were times that got better at the end. You're able to kind of, you know, I know your story of going over there and just kind of like hashing it out. Let's do this, right?
Yep.
But all those lost years, what could have been, and then I'm gonna add a piece to that. And the reason I threw the kid thing is like, obviously they'll see, you know, that's an emotional thing still, and it should be. That's fine.
Yep.
And any therapist watching would have been like, man, why didn't you dig in with Bear about why that was so big? That's a him and me conversation, folks. Like I'm not letting you do that, you know, right here. So, not that it wouldn't benefit people, but you know, like, that's a you and me conversation, you know? So, just the idea of what might have been, right? I think that hurts us terribly. And you can go so many down rabbit holes with this of like, the tribe you need, and you know, oh, cool, Bear, you did it all by yourself. Did you?
No.
You know, like no. You know, like we love to believe that we are strong. We are strong. We're type A men. We're gonna do what needs to be done. But I'm not raising those kids by myself, man. There's no way. You're like, there's no way. I never held a kid till I held mine.
I met your wife. She's a badass.
Yeah,
My
you'd
wife's
have
a
to be to
badass.
put up with us.
Yeah, 100%.
You have to be. Yeah.
Well, and there's that rugged individualism. It'd be interesting to get your take on that because you use the phrase borrowed credit, right? I get tons of borrowed credit. That, you know, people who are watching this right now, one of the questions I get constantly is like, Bear, how do you do it all? You got 5 businesses, 2 ministries, you got a homestead, you got a family, you blah, blah, blah. For the 1,000th time, I don't do it all. I do maybe 2% of it. Dudley is literally sitting on the floor right there. There's at least three cameras set up, the microphones, the lighting, all of that. Like, Dudley is doing 95% of what's happening right now.
This
I'm not.
might be you and me holding a phone.
Yeah, it could have easily been that, right? And it started that way,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, and then, like, all the businesses, it's like, wow, you do such a good job with Refuge. You mean when I show up a couple times a week and I'm like, hey, Bob, you're doing a great job, do more of that. Hey, Britt,
Right.
you're doing a great job, do more of that. Hey, Doc, hey, Mike, hey, so team. Like, they're doing all the work, right? And so it started as my vision, and as the CEO, vision and culture are my job. That's my job. And then problem solving. I'm to be a resource for the people that are underneath me in the chain of command, underneath me in the hierarchy.
Right.
But while they might be underneath me in the hierarchy, we see eye to eye. We're on the same playing field, and there's a ton
It's clear too. Yep.
there's a ton of mutual respect there.
Yep.
And one of the things that served me really, really well, and again, I learned this from my previous life of being in construction. The people who are closest to the problem know the best way to solve the problem. I'm not going to come in here and tell you what to do. It's very rare where I say, do that, right? I come in and I'm like, what's the problem? And usually they come to me and say, hey, boss, I got a problem. All right, what do you got going on? It's X, Y, and Z. All right, how do you think we should solve this? It's like, well, I think we should blah, 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 but here's the problem I see with blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there's some inherent risk in that. Newsflash, there's inherent risk in everything, right? Like there are better and worse options, but nothing's perfect.
Right.
So how do we mitigate the risk that's inherent with this course of action? Why don't you do that, but do it this way, add this little bit of a tweak. That's a good idea. Thanks, boss. You're welcome. That was your idea. Now go execute. If you have any issues, let me know. And that's 95+% of my existence is that. Yeah. It's just counseling with the people that are working with me inside of all these different organizations, including what we call our tribe. We have an intentional community, and we have multiple intentional communities of believers that all, in the big things, all believe the same. And it's a lot of people to coordinate.
Yeah,
and
a lot of people.
Now that I got that piece of paper up on the wall over there, I'm one of 2 pastors in the tribe. And that's been really interesting to navigate because, newsflash, bro, I don't know everything.
Right.
And now all of a sudden it's like, you're one of 2
Now you're
subject
teaching
matter
it.
experts.
Yeah.
And it's like, am I?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know.
Well, and I tried, one of the things we always connect on is business stuff, right?
Yep.
How did we do, I've got a couple businesses. How do you do business? How'd you get a doctorate while raising 2 kids and trying to be a dad and trying to make enough money to run the house, even though you've been fired from your job, your dream career? I don't know. Yeah, I just did it. I did it at 3 a.m. at the kitchen table, you know, and that didn't make me harder working or maybe physically, but like that didn't make me a better person than anybody else maybe there were smarter ways to do it than the way that I did it, so maybe I worked too hard sometimes. But I don't know, you just do it, you just keep going. And that's the people that we like to talk to, right? You and I met over a coaching group that was kind of teaching us some social media and business stuff, among some other things. And I'm sure it's on plenty of other talks that we've done, but like you spoke first, I spoke second, and we became best friends, over the time. And I became Bear's best buddy. I always love to claim this because now you're so much more technological and you can see all the screen of the chat and all this. You've got a screen in here that shows you the chat while it's rolling. I became Bear's best buddy, like trying to figure out when to hit enter on the on the chat so that it would pop up and not scroll past too fast. I became really good at I started to get your timing down of when. This sounds so dorky, but I started to get your timing down of when you were ending a story, kind of like this, like when to start. And I hit enter, and then he's like, "Oh, there's Trevor again."
Yep.
And we ended up becoming more friends after that, of course. But I mean, that one of the things we share is like the interest in CEO, the interest in business. Yep. I have some interest in it. It's I think for you too. It's not what we want to do. It's not my calling card. It just runs my calling card, runs everything else. But I try to do the same thing in the therapy world. I'm not here to fix anybody. Yep. I'm not with you 24/7. I cannot change your life, despite what gurus and coaches and online personalities tell you. A perfect example of this is like the fitness world, right? Like I'm a big lifter, but I'm not rich, I'm not
Yeah.
a zero body fat kind of guy,
Loser.
and I don't know that I want to be. Yeah. Like, I don't know that I have no really interest in competing that way anymore in bodybuilding, but there's a lot of people that are, and their whole calling card is they got themselves jacked, and that is cool.
Yep.
Heck yeah. That doesn't mean you're a good teacher though.
Yep.
But there's an explosion, and I'm careful with this because I think there are great coaches out there, mental health, physical, nutrition, business coaches. There's great ones out there. But man, there's this just absolute plethora of, look what I did. Now pay me $300 a month and I'll teach you what I did, which is really coming from kind of a boxed idea. So anyway, we both enjoy business, CEO stuff. How do we make this work, right? And that's what I try to do in the therapy world, because I can't be there 24/7. What we've got to fix is those little tweaks like you talked about with your employees. Like, hey, I do have some training and experience in this area. I know it's something unrelated, it feels like, but what if you did this? And there's nothing cooler than being in your office and the other person goes, shit, I hadn't thought about that.
Yep.
Like, that just took all the pressure off my shoulders, And we do that in therapy too. It's this whole thing, add on, you can add the flannel shirt in here. You can add trauma in here. This whole thing is about your filter. The way that you see things predicated on what you have been, have seen, have dealt with. Some of it may bother you. Some of it may not. Some of it may be the flannel shirt in the back of your head. Some of it may be really hardcore trauma, and you still don't think about it very often.
So Hormozi talks about that his definition of learning is same stimulus, different response.
Yeah.
And
that's good, yeah.
And that's something that has always resonated with me, right? Like, you've learned, right? Like, if you got a porn addiction, right, and you're scrolling through Instagram and you're like, oh, typically with this stimulus, I would insert hand in pants, right? Yeah. It's like, nope, different response. Turn it off, throw the phone across the room, whatever you get. Do push-ups, right? Like early on when we first moved here, that was something I was struggling with, and I went to Pastor Joe, and I was like, what do I do? I love PJ. He goes, do push-ups.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, sir.
Yeah,
understood. Thank you. Right now to the point, like, safety valve, I don't look at Instagram unless I'm in the same room as my wife, just so that we have checks and balances there, right? Because I have an addictive personality. I know this about
Don't we
me,
all? Or
right? Like,
the two of us, yeah, for sure.
Blew $1 million on coke.
Yeah.
Right? Million. Yeah, that's a 1 with 6 zeros behind it. And that was 20 years ago dollars.
Right.
Not back in 2024 dollars, right? That was 20 years ago. That was a real $1 million. But anyway, so not like checks and balances, same stimulus, different response. One of the things I'm interested with what you do, because you have a lot of different clients that come through your office, Ray Dalio in his book Principles basically boils down the concept of it's just another one of these. And his basic premise is that there's like 200-ish unique human experiences, birth and death and marriage and divorce and, being rich and being poor and blah, blah, blah. And that there's cycles and patterns that's discussed in Ecclesiastes. It's biblical, even though Dalio's an atheist. Whatever, loser. Best of luck. But he talks about, A, how there's patterns and cycles, and B, how there's like a finite number of unique human experiences, and that if you have navigated these and learned from other people who have navigated these, they become just another one of those. So if you've had a lot of people with similar experiences in your office, is it the same tweaks and moves that works across the board, or do you have to tailor that to each individual?
Yeah, if I use the term tweak, it's probably very individual. Everybody's a little different, but it goes back to this idea, and you can put almost all, if not all, it's just derelict to say all, almost all of our pathology. So anger, anxiety, depression, guilt, all the really negative stuff, the stuff nobody wants, the PTSDs, the anger, all that stuff comes from earlier life events. Now, earlier could be age 2, could be yesterday.
But aren't all life events earlier?
Right, that's what I mean.
Other
could
than
be
what's
yesterday
happening now?
Yeah,
okay.
So, but I think some people think like, well, I had a pretty good childhood, or well, no, the bad thing didn't happen on me till 30.
Right.
So it must not be that, right? So, or just earlier life events that left us feeling helpless, hopeless, and not good enough.
Right.
And that's what gets re-triggered, right? Yes, there is re-triggering to sights and sounds and thoughts and smells and beliefs and feelings and locations and times. Those are real, right? But what gets re-triggered is not the event. The event is over.
Right.
It's that helpless and hopeless and not good enough feeling, right? Even the anger, I'll step outside the box a little because we haven't talked about that issue, but like the anger with dad about the jacket, right?
Yep.
Anger doesn't sound like helpless, hopeless, not good enough until you think about how that kid felt. I was angry because I did feel helpless.
Well, I've always known for me that anger was armor.
Oh, yeah.
It has always been armor for me. I was a very angry kid.
Oh, it's my superpower.
100%.
Yep.
Dude, you want to see me wreck something?
Yeah.
Make me angry.
Yeah.
And I will come out of literally blackout, come out of a blind rage and look at the wreckage and wonder what the hell just happened. And I was the problem because I've seen me do it dozens of times.
Yes.
And so to the point now where I really, really try in my daily life to not get angry because when I am genuinely angry, I'm dangerous.
Yep.
And I don't want to be I want to be righteously dangerous for the kingdom of Elohim. Like, we're going to forsake not the widow and the orphan. But anything outside of that narrow scope, I have had to literally used to think about it as people pushing my buttons.
Yep.
And I got a visual image of going in and snipping the wires that go to those buttons. You could push it all you want. It's not connected anymore.
Yep.
Because I don't like who I am when I'm angry because I don't get just a little pissed off.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I go from 0 to 100.
Right.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, that fits perfectly. That does. Well, and I always thought, going back to the idea, I always thought that when I started doing therapy, especially with us type A guys, that I would have to spend weeks telling you why anger can be harmful, right? Because to be honest, anger has served us in our life, right? If I'm fighting somebody in a ditch on the side of the road by myself and back us 40 minutes away, anger works pretty good, right? If somebody does something to my family, if somebody does something to put us all in jail, I'm going to be angry and I'm going to react in an angry manner.
I got hit in the side of the head with a Louisville Slugger by some Goomba in the parking lot of a bar in downstate New York.
You just fluff it off and say it's okay.
Dude, when I didn't fall onto the ground, the look of horror on this guy's head.
Yeah.
And then him and 5 of his buddies just got some. So yes.
It's like an action movie where they punch the big guy and he's like,
and
uh-oh.
Everybody's going down now.
Yeah. And I thought I'd have to teach guys why anger is bad because anger's macho and anger. It does help sometimes, unlike what some people may say, some therapists may say, but the anger that's the problem is the one you described where I lost it again, right? Destroyed things, hurt somebody. And then 15 minutes later, I'm sitting on the couch feeling like a piece of crap because I did it again. I did the one thing I promised I wouldn't do again because it keeps tearing my family apart, because it ruins my career, because it takes my finances away, because it, So, and the thing is, just as you did, every time I use that, 15 minutes later, I'm sitting on the couch feeling like a piece of shit. Every guy I say that to goes, oh, yeah. I don't have to explain why anger's bad. Not once in all of these years, decade plus now, have I had to explain in using that why it's bad. Everybody goes, oh, yeah.
We know.
Because then I feel like a piece of crap. Well, again, all going back to the tweaks and if you look at all this through the fact that your brain's primary function is to keep you alive, that's all it really cares about. It likes dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine and adrenaline. Your brain doesn't care if you like your truck or your house or obviously it likes those things. It gets comfort from those things. There's serotonin and dopamine that we like from those things, right? But job one is literally stay alive, make more of us. Right? That's it. That's what our brain wants to do. Every animal knows this, right? Well, ironically, to kind of drive the point home, what are the 2 things that get us the most in trouble? High-risk activities and practicing making more of us when we shouldn't be. Whether that is porn, whether that is actual infidelity, whether that is, whatever it is.
How interesting.
Yeah. So if you think of all of your responses on the extreme end, right, as the fact that your brain's filtering this, trying to keep you alive, this is why you go 0 to 100. Right? When you can sit there and prefrontal cortex thinking part of the brain's like, I think we're okay here. Like, this is bad, but we're all right here. We've been here before.
Yep.
Right. That's the rationality part of it. That's the evidence part of it. We've been here before. We'll be okay. It's a little different this time, but but the brain goes, oh shit, here we go.
Yep.
Right. And there's parts of the brain in the neurological side that literally, I like to, this is not a professional way to say it. It's just the way I think of it. There's a part of your brain in this limbic system that takes like a Polaroid picture of everything, right? And that dates me, but takes a Polaroid picture and then hands it to the amygdala as like the file cabinet is like, here, that was crazy.
Yep.
Remember what this looks like, smells like, tastes like, feels like, because we might have to go in emergency mode again, right?
Yep.
Well, the way I like to say, and again, it may be unscientific on the world of super neurological scientist, right? But which I study, but then I like to say it in cop terms, in my terms, right? Meathead terms is it only takes one thing from that picture, from that Polaroid picture, sight, sound, thought, smell, belief. You may not even know what it is. In fact, when I talk about triggers, if you know what triggers you, I would almost argue it's probably not a trigger. It's an anxiety, right? I don't like to be in public places that are crowded. Yeah, me neither.
Yep.
I mean, maybe you get worse than I do because I've worked on it. I don't like when people disrespect me. Oh, me neither.
Yep.
Maybe mine's worse than yours, or your response is worse than mine. But I know those things. I guess we could put them in the category of triggers, definitionally. But I would argue that your triggers are ones you don't even know are happening.
Yeah.
Right? When you go 0 to 100, and then you think back, why? What did I do that for? Like I know what the catalyst may have been. It was some guy hit me or somebody cut me off or I lost money this month, whatever it is. But like, man, why did I go to 0 to 100 again?
Yeah.
Well, and again, and not that we've said this, but it's always good to point out, like, it's not because of what happened to you, right? We're not going to victimize ourselves. The last thing you want to do is come to my office and perpetually remain a victim.
Yep.
I'm going to let you tell your story, and I'm going to let you be affected by your story. Now what?
Yeah, it doesn't get to define you.
Yeah, and it shouldn't, and that's so dangerous. And man, I'll be careful with this, not because I care about being careful with it, but because I could go on for 3 hours. But I truly believe, and I hope this is all fitting together, I truly believe that most crappy therapists, which I don't think I'm the best in the world.
Yeah.
I just think that like any profession, there's crappy ones out there. Most crappy therapists and crappy parents have taught this world, you're fine the way you are. Yeah, you're a human. You're good. I value you. You might need some tweaking, right? You're fine the way you are. You should not have any adversity in your life, and everybody should believe what you believe.
Dude, that's anti-Messiah. All three of those are anti-Messiah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're deeply loved, but you're not fine the way you are.
Yeah.
Right? You got to fix yourself, and you should pick up your cross, your stake, and bear it, right? You need resistance. That's one of the worst things I think about society right now is nerfing the edges on everything and making everything easy because growth is in the struggle, right? Like you lift. It's not the first 40 reps that make you stronger. Right. It's the last 2, right? It's that one that you could barely push out, and then it's the one that you really don't want to take after that. That's the one. That one right there. That's what's making you stronger.
Yep.
And so resistance is what causes us to grow. And when you remove the resistance and the heartache from everything, and you make everything easy, we shouldn't be surprised when we've got a bunch of sopping wet pussies running around because I've never had to do anything hard.
Yeah.
And it, to your point earlier, sometimes things are just going to happen. I didn't ask for my childhood to be the way that it was,
right?
But it was. And for me, in my belief structure, I have to believe that there was a purpose to that. And as a result of that, I still abhor bullies. I cannot stand bullies.
Yep.
I will chase you down and beat your ass, right? And and now fast forward to this back here, Caleb House. It's like, just a different class of bully. Yeah. It's just a different class of people objectifying and subjectifying other people. There's not a fiber of my being that can tolerate that. And so you could, in today's modern world, make the argument that I was a victim of my upbringing and I should just feel really bad about that and allow that to define the remainder of my existence.
A lot of people do.
And a lot of people do. Yep. Or, okay, lessons learned. What did we learn from this? How does this equip and empower me to move forward so that now I can absolutely harass the shit out of people that hurt
Right.
children.
Yep.
Because that's what we do,
Yep.
right?
And of course, those demons are still going to come up. Like I never say any of those things. I have my days.
Yep.
I still have. They're rare these days, but I still have my days where wife's like, "Hey, Dad's going to sit on the couch and just have a mental health day," or we wouldn't call it that, but like,
Yeah.
you know, because that's even been misappropriated so badly by people those words.
So
but
I can't eat a gallon of ice cream and binge watch Netflix.
just call it a
and
mental health day.
health?
Yeah, I mean you can. There's going to be consequences though. So
I remember texting you a while ago, being like, "All right, question: what the hell actually is self-care?"
I'm sure my answer was like, I don't know.
It was, and
We're the biggest hypocrites when it comes.
dude, because so many people were, because we got a lot of stuff going on, and so many people was like, you need to focus on self-care, and I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
Right.
I don't even know what does that look like, and so maybe the only working definition of self-care that I've been able to acquiesce to is prioritizing your own needs above everybody else's. And so there are times where, like, brief moments in time where I will do that just to be able to maintain a core of strength for me, so then I can then be strong for everybody else. And it's a weird mindset shift for me where I have done it unconsciously, subconsciously throughout my life, but now I at least have in my mind an appropriate label to stick on it, where it's like I got to take a little bit of me time to make sure that I'm good, so that I can then be good for everybody else. Because one of the things that I've learned about me is that it is better for me to do nothing than for me to do something poorly.
Yeah.
And so when I'm in a bad place, I actually try to touch as few things as possible. I want to be as uninvolved as possible when I'm in a bad place, because the net effect is I actually make things worse when I'm in a bad place.
Yeah.
And I'm not in a position where I got too many plates spinning in the air.
Yep.
I can't be making things worse.
Yeah.
Right. And so if I know, and a lot of this comes back to self-awareness, if I know I'm not in a good place, I got to be strong enough to tell myself, hey, you're not in a good place. Why don't you take the day or take the morning, fix yourself so that you can come back, and when you do engage with your team or engage with your family or whatever, or engage with the camera, you're in a good place, so that you're not ruining all the things that you've been pouring into for the last decade or two or four. And so that has helped me as far as self-care is concerned, to reframe it that way, as like, dude, take a moment, take a beat for you so that you're good, so that you don't pollute all the other things that you touch. Because it's, that old meme of dad had a bad day at work and now the kid is kicking the cat.
Right.
Because
Right.
shit flows downhill.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
Well, and self-care can, whatever that is, like you said, whatever somebody's is, it can even come in small moments. Like you said, I have a story from a couple years ago, and I've been doing pretty well mentally these days. I still have my moments, but compared to 10 years ago, man, I'm sailing. And we're in our local grocery stores, it's just packed. I live in the county, but the grocery store in our nearest town is the second largest one of that brand in the state. Second busiest, right? So it's just people everywhere all the time, and sometimes you just got to go do it, So I'm there with my wife, who knows me well, and we've made it about halfway through the store. We're like in the frozen food section, and nobody's necessarily done anything to me. I don't demand respect from everybody. I don't think you have to get out of my way, or I do wish people would, walk on the correct side of the, like not block the whole thing with your stupid cart, whatever. It's just nobody's aware anymore, but never, what's the saying? Never attribute to malice what can be attributed to ignorance. People are just idiots sometimes. Don't know what's going on around them. Well, anyway, we get about halfway through the grocery store, and I haven't said a word, not a word. And my wife goes, "You need to go to the truck." I was like, I need to go to the truck. And it wasn't, I hate everybody. 10 years ago, it would have been. It wasn't, I can't handle the social aspect. It wasn't, poor me. It was, man, I've just had my fill of it. Like, I know where I'm going with this, which probably won't be attacking the cart guy anymore, or the manager. I guess I've tried to not do that stuff anymore, but I'm going to take it out of my wife later, in something little. I've never delayed a hand on my wife, hurt my wife or kids, but I have this very distinct memory it was a different time. It was earlier, and I remember this when I was doing kind of poorly. How it always explains to me how quickly you can go there, even knowing it's wrong. And in our dining room, I was yelling at my kids or wife for God knows what reason, probably something stupid, And I've got the wooden chair, and again, I've never laid hand on them. I've done stupid stuff, broke walls, and
Yep.
But I'm banging the chair on the ground, like making a point, yelling at the top of my lungs. And I distinctly remember, I can tell you where I was standing. I distinctly remember, like, my prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of the brain going like, this is a pretty stupid idea, man. Like, you're not getting your point across. They're all sitting on the couch looking like you just beat them all, even though you've never laid a hand on them, right?
Yep.
And so I'm doing that, and I know it's wrong. My for all intents and purpose, limbic system, that fight or flight part of my brain, this reptile part of the brain, is going, this is awesome. This is exactly how you get your point across, right?
Yep.
Now, if you're doing Caleb House stuff, or you're taking down a bully, or I reserve the right to do some stuff,
Yep.
But for my wife and kids, and again, the big part of it was when you look at all this, and this is just kind of like the umbrella to all of it. If you look at this through the understanding that your brain's primary functions to keep you alive, if it's just filtering life through what your filter is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean we want to make your filter soft. You and I have had to do really hard things in our life. Continue to, at times, but some of which people don't even know about.
Yep.
Right? And we proudly do that. But I have to maintain the ability to go there.
Yep.
For the right reason, though, right? So it's not trying to make us weak. It's not trying to make us, I don't think good therapy, or whether it is talking to a friend, therapy, whatever it amounts to, I don't think it's supposed to make you weak and love everybody and everything's fine. It's just supposed to make me resilient and have a better filter for what's going on, so that now when it's small in traffic, I can go, stupid ass.
Yep.
Instead of tailgate you for 8 miles and then get out, kick
10
the
to
corner
15
panel.
in county because assault on the side of the
Yeah.
road.
Now, and to be fair, again, reiterating the point that I don't have it all figured out either. There's an intersection next to my office. It's the largest intersection in our city. I love my office. I love my landlords. I actually like the drive there because it gives me that time to kind of shut off on the way home or think about stuff on the way there. And I always tell my wife, though, like, if I ever call you from jail, my truck is at that intersection. Like, I finally just had to brake.
Yeah.
So I'm not proud of those moments. That's why I have a dash cam.
Most people miss this. We live in the United States of America, greatest country in the world. National EMS response time is 47 minutes nationally. We have this paradigm of like, well, I'll just call 911 and it'll be okay. You get a critical bleed in your femoral artery, you got 90 to 120 seconds to fix that. You don't have 47 minutes, you got 2 minutes, right? We've trained everybody from grandmas to Navy SEALs on this stuff. I want normal, everyday people to know how to use this stuff, because if the ambulance is coming, it may not get there in time. In the United States of America, depending on which study you look at, 75 to 90% of trauma patients never make it to the hospital. If Shine and Dudley, something bad happened right now, it's like, I want to be able to take care of them. I want to be able to press pause on that clock so that when higher gets here, we can hand them off, hand them to a surgeon, put them back together again. And if you don't have the kits and the training to be able to do that, it's a crapshoot, bro.
Yeah.
And y'all are too important for me to gamble on it.
So I think it's, for me, you're talking about the filter. I think one of the things that I've either had to learn from an early age or arguably I've been blessed with is having a fair amount, maybe more than the average person, of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And knowing, rather than letting the filter shift on its own to just go into red, it's knowing in what situations it is appropriate to put the red filter in.
That's it.
Right?
That's it.
And versus blue or green or yellow based upon the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that it's... I was fascinated, side quest, to learn that apparently there's some people that have no inner dialogue. It's
amazing to me. Yeah.
Bro, I got 36 tabs open up here right now. Right?
I've gone through 11 stories since you started 3 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I like, okay, are those the actual NPCs? I have no idea. Well, actually, no, because I know one of them. But anyway, it's knowing in what situations is it appropriate to apply this filter. And I'm I think part of it is having grown up in a household where I had to learn to read people real quick.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you can tell just the way dad comes through the front door what kind of evening we're going to have. Right? And so that turns into watching body language. Before Chris Voss came out with all of his books and neuro-linguistic programming and all that stuff, before NLP and all that, you just knew you could read the body language of somebody and know how the evening's going to go or how this engagement is going to go. And so I do a lot of that without even meaning to. And that helps me know which frame we're in, what filter to put. It's part of why, like, situational awareness is just kind of just built into me when we're out, out at the grocery store, or out bowling or something. I see somebody acting weird before anybody else in my family does.
Yep.
And I'm like, something's up with that guy.
Yeah.
But again, when it's time to do dangerous stuff, righteous, dangerous stuff, all right, red filter. This is the appropriate filter for this set of actions we're going to undertake.
Yeah.
But, like, screaming doesn't accomplish anything. It's something that I've learned. Like, other than, you're right, lizard brain, it feels great.
Yep.
And having that awareness in the moment of, like, this might feel good, but it's 0% effective,
Yep. I learned early on. I had a client, late teenager, and they knew she'd had some trauma in her life. They were aware of the trauma she'd had in her life. Some pretty significant stuff that had happened, but things were going okay. She's kind of in a place of, it was years later, and so they go. Her and her friends go to a movie, and right in the middle of the movie, she just gets up and runs out. Doesn't say you have to go to the bathroom. Just gets up and runs out, and they find her in the stall, like in the fetal position, cowering and crying and saying, "I don't know what happened. I just had she called it a panic attack, an anxiety attack." Yep. So I'm learning about, this early on. So I'm learning about this stuff. And so we spent a little time trying to figure out the why, which I might do a little differently now in a different way. But again, what's going on here? What was going on? And it was like a love story. It wasn't I was thinking like, oh my gosh, did somebody shoot somebody, or did she see a car wreck, or somebody fall off a roller coaster? Like what? It was like a Matthew McConaughey love story or something,
I would run out of a Matthew McConaughey.
I mean, I would, maybe in the fetal position too, but like, this poor 16-year-old girl or whatever. And come to find out, we got down to the really finite details. You don't always have to do. When she ran out, she was able to kind of identify, because she was calm, the whoever the main character was like on a beach scene, took his shirt off. Not really necessarily nefarious, maybe you think it's inappropriate, maybe, I don't know. But it turns out when the bad things were happening to her when she was 8 by a family member, the first thing he did was take his shirt off every time he came in the room.
Yep.
She knows that story. She's old enough to remember that story.
Yep.
It happened repeatedly, right? She's in a pretty good place, all these years, those years later. This has been a while. She's probably in her late 20s now, but she was doing pretty good. That was just a really horrible thing that happened. She kind of been able to kind of put it in a place of like, all right, it's not who I am. I don't like to talk about it. It's embarrassing, but wasn't my fault. She really was there. So by all intents and purposes, a lot of people would tell you like, well, that's probably not the problem then. If you're in a good, I'll have people come in all the time and say like, I had this happen, but I'm fine with it. Maybe you're fine with what happened and how it happened, and it maybe doesn't mean, well, what did her brain do?
Yep.
Oh crap, here we go. Code
Went
red,
right
get out of here.
Polaroid.
Yep. And all she knew was get out of here right now.
Yep.
And that's a very easy case to follow. They're not always that clean, to be able to follow. But one of the lines of questioning that we'll use, and I'll skip a couple of these for anybody that's familiar with EMDR, but just to get to the point, but what I always like to ask people when they come in is, what do you want to see change?
Yep.
Right? Like, I know that you were sent here for anger by your agency. I know that you feel like you're depressed and can't get out of bed, and maybe those things are true. What do you want to see change? And they'll anger, anxiety, depression, guilt, trauma, whatever is going on. Almost nobody says trauma.
Yep.
Because by God, I can handle it. My people I can handle the trauma, which we do.
Yep.
But, and then, skipping a little, one of the things I'll ask them is like, well, tell me a story about where that screwed you over recently. Oh man, I was having a fight with my wife over money again, and this happened. And I'm like, okay, what what emotion is that for you? Oh, that's that anger right there. Like, I know it. I just can't seem to get on top of it. All right. When you're at your worst of anger, again, this is skipping a few steps. When you're at your worst of anger, what does it mean about you? I'm kind of a piece of crap. I'm uncontrollable. In the moment, I'm just angry. Later, I feel like a piece of trash. I've done it again. I've yelled at her again. I've made the kid cry. I've made the kids run off. We're getting divorced again. When you hold that anger and that feeling of not good enough, when is the earliest in your life you remember that? And there's some physical things we may add to that too with people. Man, you'd be amazed how many times people go, shit, I was 8.
Yep.
I was 8. And it's kind of interesting. I've been doing that for a long time. And that may not be the issue, right? It's a really good starting place, though, because if you learned at 8 you're not good enough, guess what happens at 40 when something happens that has nothing to do with what happened at 8, right? And it could have been at 20. You could have started. But this is your filter now. The reality is I'm not good enough. I'm helpless. I'm hopeless. I'm not good enough. And that's what you filter things through. So we may not have to work on the thing that's at 8. Maybe you are in a pretty decent place with it, right? For somebody. Maybe you are in a place that's pretty healthy of like, that was horrible, but I'm here now, which is exactly healthy mindset. That's a properly processed memory. Some of that stuff doesn't get processed correctly. There's the neurology part to this, EMDR, and trauma in general, which I'm fascinated with, that we don't teach enough to therapists and we don't teach enough to people. So if that becomes your filter, guess what you go back to when you're angry? Not good enough. You were protective when you were angry, but depression, anxiety, and guilt all went back to not good enough. Angry just covers those 3, I like to say. It's the armor, right?
Yep.
It's what I'm going to put on so I don't have to feel this.
Yeah, because I know I'm not good enough in here, so I'll just be angry out here.
Yep. Oh, it's forward thinking instead of like, you and I are not guys who like to sit in our shell. No. I'm going to go do something about this. It may not have always been the best course of action for
100%
us.
no. Most of the time, no.
Yeah, but we do because it feels like I'm doing something. Suck it up and go do something about it. Hey, sometimes that works. If your roof is falling apart, you're going to have to suck it up and do something about it, right? But those underlying issues, those stressors, those beliefs, right? It always comes back to it. And again, maybe it wasn't 8. Maybe it was 25. Maybe it was yesterday, the car wreck you had yesterday, right? And maybe you don't sit around and those words helpless, hopeless, and not good enough don't mean anything to you right now,
right?
But there's not many times that I say it that somebody doesn't go, oh yeah, man, like not every day, but when I'm at my worst, you just said it. I hear all the time, you hit the nail on the head. And the last kind of like neurology part to that is, this is a little experiment I do in my head. I don't really explain it to clients, although it can be interesting. When I ask them, probably 98% of the time I'll say, when does that go back to? That what you just said about yourself, what does that go back to? 98% of people will say 7 years old. I could almost write it on my hand.
Yep.
And here's why. Once I understood that phenomenon, I wanted to know why, right? So 7 is when your prefrontal cortex starts coming online, this thinking part of the brain. Before 7, you've raised kids. I've raised kids. Most people have been around kids. Before 7, you're just kind of like this bowl of jelly, learning your alphabet and not to poop yourself, right? Like you can learn some stuff, but it's very superficially cognitive. You're just getting the reps of new life in, right? 7's when that prefrontal cortex starts to come online, the thinking part of the brain. And, if you think back to kids you've raised, like 7's when they start asking questions and like have a little personality and, start trying to figure out the whys of things, challenging you just a little bit, It's because their thinking brain's coming online. So I fully formed till age 25. I was carrying a gun at age 21, so make of that what you want. But some of us had to grow up a little faster, than 25. But I'm never amazed anymore when somebody's like, man, I hadn't thought about this in a long time, and I don't really know that it bothers me that bad, but yeah, about 7 is when I remember that. Now, some people will say 3 or 4 or 20 or 40 because of a significant thing they remember, right? And the other piece that got me to this was that depending on what report you read, most civilians will see 1.5 to 2 critical events in their life. Really hard stuff. Maybe lots of medium stuff. 2 really life-changing stuff you're not supposed to see is the average, 1.5 to 2. Cops, depending on what report you read, will be between 400 and 800 in a 25-year career.
Wow.
Right? Well, that tells me 2 things. One, they're pretty resilient and badass because they keep going, despite what some people think about public safety. Yes, there's bad apples in every job, right? Maybe this is why sometimes there's bad apples in every job. Heaven forbid. But they're badass because they keep going. And it also tells me it's not the trauma.
Right.
If it was the trauma, you'd have quit on day 2.
Right.
Your brain would have said, no, we can't go to this again. We cannot go through this again, right? So it must be something else. Why can I and a coworker go to the exact same call and he's fine and I'm a mess?
Right.
Well, we can trace little things, which is what we always did. Well, it was a 2-year-old. He has a 2-year-old at home. Oh, absolutely. That'll affect you more. I've been suspect of that. Absolutely. Yep. Right. I used to go fatal car wrecks all the time. I worked for the state police. So you had fatal car wrecks all the time, weekly, if not sometimes daily during the week. And it was just gross and weird and interesting kind of to do the investigation. But you had to tell the family and, there's some really negative stuff to it. But man, when I started having kids, ooh, man, that 7-year-old in the back seat, that looked like way different. And people will tell you, I'm trying to make this as vague as I can. We had an incident in my area where a head-on collision on the interstate. Drunk driver got on the interstate the wrong way, head-on collision. And it killed a family of, I want to say 5, mom and kids. And just horrific. I mean, the action of the crash was so violent. Everybody just, there were some internal decapitations and it was horrible, right? Well, one of the guys that gets there, I won't say in what order, but one of the guys that gets there is kind of looking at this. The EMS isn't there yet. They're a little further out, he's trying to sort all this out. And I don't remember what the kid was. Maybe the kid was 2 or 3 laying on the ground, been ejected from the car, horrific. I worked with him probably 6 or 8 or 12 months later. All he could see was his kid every time he thought about that. And first day, that makes a lot of sense. 14 days, 30 days, that makes a lot of sense. Like, man, I'm really having trouble kind of swallowing this one because it just, same size and had the same jacket on my kid has. But after about 6 months, man, that brain's not braining like it's supposed to, right? Yep. Like you're not getting that stuff put away. There's where stuff like EMDR does its best, quickest work is that single incident trauma. EMDR is much more robustly built for long-time trauma and long-time thoughts. But another important thing I think that brings up about trauma is, and again, I'm careful about identifying who these people are, even though they've told me I could tell their story. I just try to be careful. So after that crash, we had a diffusing with the fire department. I work with the fire department in Lexington, the biggest fire department in the state. They do more for mental health than I see a lot of agencies do. I'm very proud of them and the team they've put together and the people they've picked, and they see it's important. So we had a diffusing, and for whatever reason, the PD did not, the police did not, for this incident, and so we invited the cops to come, which is pretty rare for the fire department. We're 2 rival football teams, right? So, and I just learned a really good trauma lesson with this. So he comes in, and just the very first officer that got there, he comes in, and of course he's out of place. He doesn't know these people, but he's sitting down, he's got his head down, he's really disheveled looking, and all the different units come in. And one of the things we do with that is we have one representative from each unit.
Right.
Tell us what happened. You have to be detailed. Just tell us, what'd you see? What was your role? And we do that initially because I think there's something to putting the whole piece together. How many times have we seen the whole story and gone, ooh, that makes sense. Yeah. I see why you did that now. Like, I still don't agree, but I see why you did that, right? And it doesn't have to be a disagreement at that level. It could just be I like to put the story together. Oh, yep, I see. Okay, I know the pieces now. This still horrible, but well, anyway, he was there first. He got the call first, so we had him go first. And he just kind of looks up and he says, man, I got there. It was the worst thing I've ever seen. I had no idea what to do. I knew everybody was dead. So there's no life-saving I can do. Some were still breathing and stuff, so they had work to do, but he's like, this is above my level, you know? I can't hold somebody's neck or a leg or something. So I just tried to do cop stuff and get traffic, Well, anyway, the first emergency unit, EMS unit pulls up. Medic jumps out, jumps the median so they can go and turn around. And the medic said, what do you got? and this was the medic side of the story. He's like, he jumped over and he's like, hey man, I need you to know something. Cause what the cop did was after he told that story, he put his head back down. Like,
Yep.
he's like, dude, I felt completely helpless. I felt completely helpless standing there. And that cop, his head went right back down. And the medic said, he's like, hey man, I jumped the median. And he's like, hey man, I need you to know something. Like, the fact that you could point out where people were and like, not good, dead, not good, and how many people I had, he's like, that took care of triage for me. Like, I still had to do the medical part of it. He's like, but that told me, oh, we need 4 more ambulances.
Right.
We need more of their interstate blocked off. We need more people here. We need more assets to this. He's like, dude, you have no idea how helpful that was. And you just saw that cop just sit up like
okay.
And in him, it wasn't like, I saved the day.
Right.
In him, it was, so I'm not a piece of shit. Is that
Right.
what you're saying? I'm not a piece of shit. And man, that taught me a lot about that's a short thing in the beginning you can work on, but that taught me way more about trauma, where I was taught this incident causes this. You got to work through this. You got to do exposure therapy for this. Man, when I started to learn like where all this comes from, dude, I think it made me a better therapist. It definitely changed the way that I think about things.
Yeah.
And I'm careful because everything doesn't go back to trauma. Sometimes you're just an a-hole. Sometimes you need to suck it up and deal with this issue. Sometimes you got screwed. Sorry, like I know you're mad, but if things are repeating in your life, you got to figure out you're the common denominator. Now, maybe the common denominator is you suck at picking spouses, or maybe you're not a piece of crap, right? But somewhere in there's a common denominator. So when I started to see the common denominators of trauma-related events, which isn't all I treat, but man, it really opened up understanding how to help people and myself, to be honest, right? Rather than that just box of like, well, what should little Johnny do differently next time? And maybe we should, you're stressed. Maybe we should make a calendar for, like how to lay out your day better. And those are good therapy things.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I call those the technical parts of therapy. That's like that's the fine dust to me,
Yeah.
You'll never get through the technical part to work if you don't take care of the emotional overload first.
Yep.
You won't. I can teach you all day about, and I do a very cognitive therapy too, rational motive behavior therapy. Love it. Changed my life. I've been able to go really far in it and love it. But until you take care of that emotional overload, man, you're not taking care of the
Yeah. If you
technical
don't break
stuff.
the boulders, the dust don't matter.
Yep. And what's even, if I can put it in context the best I can, like I'm very fortunate. I get to do what's called an associate fellowship at the Albert Ellis Institute. Albert Ellis is who created REBT. I mean, that's how much very few people get to do this. In fact, when I was there was only 2 of us from the U.S. that were there. Everybody else from other countries, and they spoke better English than I did, which is funny. But I am from the South. But so I've gone really far in getting really good at this because it's changed my life. And I'm in this training with New York City. These people that I really look up to, they're direct descendants of learning from Albert Ellis, and like, man, they know their stuff. I'm in awe of these people. I'm not in awe of many people. When I talk to these people, I'm like, God, I hope you think I'm a good therapist. It's one of those people, right?
Right.
One of them even said, dude, when it's complex trauma, I got to refer it out. And I'm like, dude, like the best of the best are willing to say, if that stuff's still going on, you thinking about it's not going to work.
Yep.
You just trying to change the story or think it differently is not going to work.
So what is complex trauma? What does that mean?
It's got a couple different definitions now, because the reality is if you look at the diagnostic manual for mental health disorders,
Right.
it's not in there.
Okay.
Right? It's PTSD.
Okay.
The complexity for most of us is that it's complex occurrences or complex issues, right? I don't want to use the word simple PTSD, but that is the opposite of complex, right? Normal, regular, I don't even like to say run-of-the-mill PTSD, because I have a whole speech I can give on
Call
that
it basic and
diagnosis.
advanced.
Yeah, just kind of the first level, right?
Right.
Is that like single incident trauma? I'm scared to get in a car. We found out you were in a car wreck 6 months ago. Single incident trauma. Man, that stuff's that is the magic wand of EMDR part. People will call sometimes EMDR like a magic wand, like, man, I just feel better and the weight's off my shoulders and it only took 2 sessions. Yes, it does that.
Yep.
Usually for single incident stuff, which is a lot of what I treat, you know. Hey, I've done good for 20 years in law enforcement, but I went to this call with an abused kid and I just can't sleep at night, you know, or I can't get out of my head or I'm yelling at my kids. Single incident. Complex to me is we got a lot of stuff to work through, right? And you talked about your early life. My early life was stressful. We were very poor. I mean, we lived behind a strip club in the ghetto of East Fort Worth, you know, like I have some crazy memories of learning what fishnet stockings were before when I was a kid, like 8, because they'd walk out of the strip club and go over to the payphone next door, you know. My dad telling me, like, don't worry about it. Just, I don't even tell you what that is. Anyway, so we grew up really poor. Looking back on it, I don't think I even knew how poor we were at times. My parents did a pretty good job. I knew we didn't have money.
Right.
But looking back on like the houses we lived in and where we were, like, we were poor. So anyway, that was probably the biggest stressor of my childhood. We moved a lot, which was a little stressful. My dad was a pastor, so he would, you know, in a denomination, you got to grow churches, you get bigger and bigger. So we moved a lot. That was a little stressful, but I had a pretty good childhood. I definitely have some negative memories and like anybody, right? But my parents always told me they loved me. They always made sure I felt safe, that I could do anything I put my mind to, and so even through law enforcement, I would see the opposite of that a lot. But I also knew I was inundated with a percentage of it that most people wouldn't see, right? Which is true. I don't think every kid has a horrible childhood, you know, or I won't say that there are some that don't have trauma. Trauma comes in so many forms, right? But there are so many that are just kind of doing life. You know, parents take care of them, and I knew through law enforcement that I was seeing some things that probably went back to people's childhood or upbringing, and again, I want to be careful about childhood. Childhood is just a big part of it. It could be yesterday, something that happened, right? It doesn't have to be, but a lot of it is that early filter. But in my head, in public safety, I just kind of was like, well, yeah, that's the houses we go to all the time. That's the people we deal with all the time. I have an unfair percentage of what I'm seeing here. You know, I can't judge. Man, I'll tell you, doing therapy, and the vast majority of people that come in my office, they're like, oh, that's from age 7. And I'm like, gosh, man, I'm just not surprised anymore. Or that's from 18 when I left the house and everything was really good till then, and this horrible thing happened in college. I've never been the same, right? I say childhood just because that's when you get the most of your formulation of your brain, and you know when you learn how to handle situations. But again, it could be yesterday. I don't want to get hung up on the childhood part, but the vast majority of what I see is, you know, and so then I started learning about neurology and learning from these great therapists that look at the past and look at how this formed, and from people that look only at neurology to people that just kind of figured out how to talk you through the neurology part, right? And everything in between, every modality in between. I wanted to be great at all of them, you know. You know, if you're building a house, you can't just be the electrician.
Right.
You know, like I don't think about building houses. I probably misspeak all of that, but fairly confident you need to be more an electrician to get that figured out. Like, could you build a couple roofs? Probably. Should you? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not in the long term, right? The roofer probably shouldn't put in electricity either, you know, but I wanted to be the contractor. You know, I want to be the guy that's like, well, how you talked about CEO stuff. I need to come in and tweak some stuff. I don't think we need to change your whole life. Easy. I think we need to fix some of this stuff that keeps coming up, whether it be trauma, whether it be thoughts, whether it be stuff that is going on in your life, right? Like if you're getting beat at home, let's fix that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to change the emotion of that one.
Right.
You know?
So you mentioned earlier with the Polaroid photograph analogy there, that so basically your brain is taking a snapshot, right? I had a couple of thoughts. One is that, you know, if we go back thousands of years or whatever, when it came to the survivability of the species, right, or the survivability of your clan or your tribe, if you're in the tall grass and you see the grass moving It doesn't always mean there's a tiger that's about to attack you, but it could mean that. And so that becomes a trigger, that part of the Polaroid. It could be 1,000 things, but it might be the tiger. And if I get it wrong with the tiger, we all die. Right. And so that becomes a cue that you cue in on, which is maybe in your terms a trigger, right? And so there's a lot of things in my life where like I've had to assign probability and possibility, 2 different scales.
I like those. Yeah.
All things are possible. It's possible that that's a tiger, but it's a very low probability that it's a tiger in the grass. Not that I'm not ready for the tiger, but I'm not going to leap into action, put the red filter on, and go full-blown bear man and start killing things until I know it's a tiger in the grass.
Right.
And then the other thing that you brought up was neurologically, these snapshots that you have here in the processing from the prefrontal cortex, and you brought up the limbic system. Are there that you know of, because you're a world-renowned doctor, you know, it's not often that I'm in the presence of a world-renowned doctor. And that's no shit for everybody who's listening. You're like one of a handful of people on earth that has the same stack of credentials that you have.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, you're a freaking hard worker.
Well, yeah, there's a big piece to it. Yeah.
So are there any that you know of? Are there genetic predispositions to not processing those Polaroids effectively? Are there some people that came hardwired when they came into Earth, that they're hardwired to where they maybe traumatize more easily because they don't process that information appropriately?
Yeah, there is a genetic predisposition to a lot of mental health disorders. So the one I like to bring up is like alcoholism.
Okay.
Right? You may have
right
a
here,
genetic...
buddy. I don't know why you got to... Whatever, bro.
It's going to fit well, right? You may have a genetic predisposition to alcoholism.
Okay.
I would say maybe addictive personality, but maybe there is one specifically for leaning on alcohol or substances or, you know, wherever we're going with this. But so, yes, there's a genetic predisposition to some mental health disorders. And I don't think we know why all the time. You know, the brain's that one organ we're still kind of figuring out. We're pretty good at kidneys and livers, you know, but brain, man, we still find out stuff every day, you know, that's amazing. So, and it's definitely not, I'm not an expert at it. It's just one of my specialties that I try to learn, but because it helped me along the way so much. So there is a genetic predisposition to it, but there was probably some incidents and actions that kicked it off, right? If your family never drank,
right,
and you got in a group at college that just didn't drink, maybe you joined a group that is also against it or had parents that were alcoholics, or, you know, the likelihood of that just alcoholism just popping up for you is pretty rare, I would think. I don't know the statistics behind it, but so I would have to argue that there's a predisposition to trauma as well. And here's how I would frame it. Just because I don't know everything about the predisposition part, here's how I would frame it is what EMDR treats is maladaptively processed or unprocessed memories. There's some things that we think and we believe wholeheartedly about EMDR. There's some things we can prove through brain scans. One of the things, and I put this in the think category, I'm going to tell you, I'll just be man enough to go on a limb and say I'm pretty sure that this is a big part of it, even though you can't prove this with brain scans. You have 2 different hemispheres of the brain. They effectively kind of have different jobs, right? I like to describe, this is not going to be this is not going to be scientifically Stanford level, you know, Dr. Human based. So, you know, stay with me. Yeah. Right? So that guy, he loses me. So left side's kind of like the logic side. It's where everything's stored, right? I didn't drive here today thinking about how to change a flat tire. But now that I just said that, we can all see how to change a flat tire.
I already ran through the process.
It's just right there, right? In fact, I can add a piece to this. We have a very good friend. You and I have a very good friend who was a longtime fighter pilot in the Marines, right? Yep. He said something that really resonated with me because I always think like fighter pilots they got 40 things going at once and they're watching this and doing this. He says, no. He's like, my brain is in checklists so fast that I'm on number 40 when you're on number 1.
Yep.
So I've already gone through the possibilities and the fixes.
Yep.
You know, he's not doing 40 things at once. He's really fast. at going through checklists,
Yep.
right? And that's why they hone that into them. That's the logic side of the brain, right? You're not making that checklist up as you go. Let's be honest, right?
Right.
Not in a plane that's crashing to the ground, right? Well, what should we do here? When you get some air over the wings, right? The right side is kind of I call it the chaos side.
Okay.
It's not bad chaos. It's just all the incoming information, right? And when you go to sleep, REM sleep, rapid eye movement, your eyes are moving. You're not looking at anything. What's going on? Well, the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body and vice versa. So I like to say we're kind of reversing the polarity. So your brain moving your eyes are moving. It's a cool design that we have. I know who designed it. Some people don't believe it, but pretty cool design we have that's stimulating both hemispheres of the brain at the same time. Mm-hmm. And what's effectively going on, and again, like brain scientists would shriek at the way I'm saying this, but it's taking all the information from the right side and putting it on the left side. It's putting everything away, right? And for most things like flat tire, there's a container for that. Mm-hmm. How to drive, how to stay safe, right? And you could add to that. If you changed a flat tire in a blizzard on the interstate and the semi-trucks were scaring you, you put over there, let me get off the interstate next time, even if it's detrimental to my car, right? There's some stuff you don't have a box for, man. Yeah. And some of that's easy, right? Some of the big T traumas, that's pretty easy. Like where are you supposed to put 9/11? Where are you supposed to put losing a family member to a tragedy? Where are you supposed to put, physical abuse? But I would also argue where are you supposed to put the red flannel, right? Like that doesn't make sense when you're a kid. Yeah. Like you and I can just go, that was a dick move. Yeah. Like should have punched him in the face or whatever. Yeah.
After 40 years of context.
Yeah. But before it's just like, I guess this is how the world is. And I guess I just can't trust people. And I guess I can't, I can't buy myself nice things because like, I guess my hard earnings means nothing.
If I think about it, it really comes back to, what's the point? What's the point? Right? Yep. I'm going to bust my ass and I've cut all this firewood and I'm trying to help the family and I got myself a jacket so I won't freeze to death.
And how many people do we see are stuck in that though forever? It's not worth it. I'm just going to it's not worth it. Yeah.
And I don't know. Praise the Father, man, that he made me a workaholic to just work beyond that.
Sometimes what it takes.
Yeah.
And so the rest of the brain part was, now, again, we can't necessarily show that scientifically. The people that follow, like, strict neurology and the Hubermans, like, they don't like hearing that stuff. But I'm telling you, that's got to be a part of what happens. Here's what we can prove, and here's what I was getting to. So the bilateral stimulation of EMDR, which is that's what everybody thinks EMDR is. That's a small piece of EMDR. It's just a tool that we use. The whole thing is a concept. The whole thing is about how to get.
You're talking about the bean pods?
Also, yeah. You can use vibrations. You can use eye movements.
So I told my doc, right, because they make you hold these two little bean pods, right, and they vibrate. Left, right, and then there's a light bar, and the lights bounce back and forth, left, right, and so I'm holding these bean pods, and for whoever's watching this, maybe this is the first time you've been introduced to Bear. I'm a drummer. I've been a drummer for a long time, and so I don't know. I guess there's different rhythms that you can set the bean pods on,
speeds, intensities.
But when he started it, it was in a 3/4. So that's like a waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And I'm like, well, that's relaxing. And so I'm holding these two different things. And I said, Doc, these vibrate at two different frequencies. He said, what? I said, yeah, they're two different frequencies. Yeah. The one on the left is lower than the one on the right. Yeah. And he's like, he goes, I've been doing this for 20 years. He's like, you just walked in here and like shattered my paradigm. Yeah. I was like, yeah, that's probably intentionally. It helps with the bilateral stimulation. They're not vibrating at the same frequencies. And anyway, so
I do EMDR so much. I've advice. I've bumped the speed on accident, because really, to be perfectly honest, a little behind the scenes, I'm really counting how many reps we've done. When I first got into EMDR, they're all different devices. Well, I was broke, I was a broke, brand new therapist with a bunch of college loans and still trying to get my doctorate at that point. So, there was a more expensive one that would have a number that would count the reps. I'm like, I only get the cheaper one. I know how to count. I'm good here. Yep. Man, I wish I'd have gotten that one with the numbers, but because I'm just going to get mesmerized by the lights, I bumped the speed one time and we stopped. The processing takes about 30 seconds at a time on average. And I said, what do you notice going on? And he said, man, I swear to God, those things sped up. I'm like, Yeah, they did. They did. Sorry, my bad.
Have you ever
know.
accidentally like EMDR'd yourself during a therapy?
I haven't. I have some stories of friends that have used it to either calm down that safe kind of feeling. I've got too many dark history to EMDR myself. Like
Yeah.
I'm afraid I'll just go down this track.
You'll get
you know?
stuck in an EMDR hole.
Yeah. So on that bilateral stimulation thing, again, that's what people think EMDR is. That is a tool that we use in EMDR.
Yeah.
This whole thing is the idea, but the left-right thing, again, some neurologists will say that's not real. Those of us that have watched it happen go like, something's happening, man. Maybe I'm not articulating the words correctly, but something's happening. Here's what we have proven over and over and over again with brain scans, though. Bilateral stimulation, right? Especially side to side, whether that be eye movement, hands, whatever. Lateral stimulation, bilaterally, calms the limbic system.
Yep.
It slows the limbic system down. We have shown that over and over and over and over again on brain scans. So even if the left-right thing is wrong, I don't think it is, but because I've seen it, I've seen this idea work, right? Thousands and thousands of times. At a minimum, you're being given the memory, right? And he probably gave you like a visual and a thought, right? We're not slapping with the whole thing. We're giving you a memory while keeping your limbic system calmer.
Yep.
Right? And now you're able to process the memory a little bit. The memory doesn't change. There is no point where he probably said, well, here's what your dad meant, right?
Yeah.
That's for you to figure out. That's for your brain to go, oh, shit.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Like, I'm still mad, but, okay. I'm getting part of this, right? And even all we're doing is presenting it to you. There's some kind of I don't want to say it wrong. Zygotic effect. And it's still pretty, it's not a new phenomenon. It's been used for trauma stuff for a long time. They're looking at it really strictly with EMDR, and it's that when we're feeding it to you at little pieces at a time, it's not slapping you in the face, right? And most people, I've got their permission to tell these stories, even though I don't identify them. One person told me that it takes it from right here in color to back here in black and white. Just like it's there, but like, that's a terrible story, right?
I remember when you said that, and literally for me with my EMDR sessions, you said 7 years old is when most people identify. For me, it was 4. And I vividly remember, I can still right now recall the exact circumstances of that situation.
Yeah.
But previously, when I would think about that, it was a trigger. It was like PTSD. It was like I'm reliving that exact moment right now. I'm in it. And it has gone from that, and in stages, it went from that to I'm in it to being a picture up on the wall that was in color to now it's in a small black and white frame, and it's about 100 meters over there.
Perfect. That's exactly what I hear. Yep.
And if I want to go look at it, I can. I will walk over there in my brain, look at the picture, and go, I remember that. That was fucked up.
The other one I like to use.
And then be able to walk away.
Yes.
That's the thing.
That's what's so important is that it's still real. We didn't change the story. Like at no point should an EMDR therapist or any therapist of any therapy really go like, well, why don't you think about it this way? Right. You know, now there may be a cognitive interweave we throw at you to get you thinking, well, what do you think your dad was thinking? You know, but it's not my job to go, here's what's up. Right. There are times really good EMDR therapists that are really confident with hard trauma may push that boundary just a little bit if you're stuck, you know, but one of the things I love telling at the end of a session is people are like, where did that come from? I'm like, I don't know. You're the one that thought of it. Like, I didn't tell you anything, man. I didn't push this in. One of my good friends was the first to get to a horrific plane accident. 49 out of the 50 people were killed on board.
Wow.
It happened in my city. Is a good friend of mine. He doesn't mind me identifying, but I'll just tell the story just for this part. And man, it's a good friend of mine. He is like, if there was a shit magnet, it's him. It's this guy. Everybody on that apartment knows it, right? He just recently retired. But man, he had gone for 10, 15 years. I'm trying to do the math in my head. Suffering from this. And not that anything's going to make this good, right? In fact, I'll tell you a piece that leads into this, I think, so well, and I'll finish with kind of the filter thing, is that he's a very tough individual, somebody I very much look up to. He was my beat partner for a while. I love this guy. I've risked my life with him. I would today.
Yeah.
Right. Great dude. Really knows his stuff in policing. Great guy. He filtered that kind of the rest of us did that went to that. It was a horrible event. It was sad. It was tragic. There was things you'd never seen anywhere else because that's that kind of catastrophic energy you just can't describe, a plane crash. So, but he was functioning, he was still a cop and he was a dad and a husband. And he said that he tells this story, which is why I'm comfortable with it, is years later, and he's with his son and young son, and they're at a department store, like at the toy section. And right next to the toy section was suitcases. And he sees this little kid's I remember like Dora the Explorer, some kind of iconic kid suitcase, and hit the floor, either physically or mentally, kind of hit the floor, right? Yep. And for him, it was like the first, things were going okay. He'd done a bunch of press conferences. He had a kid afterwards. He's married. Life's kind of going on. I think he's promoted at this point.
Right.
And he immediately remembered something he never remembered before, which was stepping over one of those kids' suitcases at this thing, right? And, that's a innocent victim, man. There's a lot of calls, let's be honest, there's a lot of calls that we go to where like, yeah, you put yourself in a pretty stupid position here, didn't you? Now you got to deal with the consequences. I'm going to help you, but your life decisions have gotten you there. Those people got on a plane to go on vacation, man. Like pilots took off on the wrong runway, is what caused that. So anyway, I say that because I think that story really illustrates how you can be fine for a while. Yeah. He wasn't thinking about it every day. He was doing life, Yeah, you'd have to do a press conference on an anniversary and you think about it for a few days. But anyway, that's how it hits you, right? That's the real triggers. That's the real ones, man. He wasn't going like, can't see suitcases. It just hit him, man. So anyway, we did EMDR. And again, that's no breach in that. He absolutely wants me to tell that story. What he likes to say is because he's younger, it puts a Snapchat filter on. He's like, it's almost like I'm looking at this scene, right? And it's kind of like goofy
right
now. It's still real, right? He still has to see the medals on the wall and every anniversary comes up, there's a monument built, if that's the right word, a memorial built, at our airport that you see all the time for these 49 people. But it just made it not slap him in the face all the time, So now it's just kind of like, man, that sucked. Yeah. And if you think about it, that's how I feel about most of the tragedies that I've seen. I'm like, man, I miss that guy. Shit.
Yep.
I miss that guy. And that's it.
So, question. So oftentimes you brought up the medals that this guy has, right? A lot of times when we have people who are in public service, military, decorated veterans, right? They're decorated because their actions at the worst possible moment.
Yeah.
Do those awards that they've been awarded serve as a trigger? Is it an anchor point for this negative memory for them? Is that something that you've
It is, definitely, but I'll take it even a step further. This happened to me. So I was 21, brand new cop. I may not have even been 21 yet. I can't remember. Getting into law enforcement, brand new cop. And I read this book by a guy named, at the time, he was a sergeant, Randy Sutton, Las Vegas Metro. Las Vegas, man, they see crazy stuff. I'm a small town cop, my first job, right? At my hometown, my home area. So like I'm gonna read this crazy book of criminals and robberies and and I read the intro, which at that time in my life I didn't read many intros. I just kind of skipped to the story. And it was this guy, Randy, and he said, it says like, and I'm gonna just, I'm not gonna quote it. It's been a long time, but it said something effective like, I'm writing this book about all the stories of cool stuff that I've seen. But what I want to write right now is that I'm sitting at my house in front of the fire, drinking bourbon or whatever he was drinking. I got a life-saving award today. And again, I have to paraphrase this. It's been a while. But got a life-saving award today or this week. And he's like, I've got all these awards on the wall. And all I can think about is throwing them all in the trash because I'm a piece of shit. And these aren't really real. Like I'm a piece of crap human being. And at 21 or 20, I remember reading that and thinking, what an idiot. Yeah. What the hell's wrong with this? Like, the medals, like, I don't do it for the medals, but I'm pretty proud of those
pretty
ones.
cool.
Like, I mean, like, I
Yep.
did this, you know, like, cool, you did good on your Excel sheet at work. I did this, you know,
Right.
and not to downplay anybody's job, but like, I take pride in that, right? So fast forward, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I'm out. I'm doing the therapy thing. And I'm just sitting at my desk. I don't have a client for some reason that hour. I'm sitting at my desk and this Facebook Live pops up. I'm not a Facebook guy. I'll rant once in a while on it, but I don't flip through very often. So why it was open, I don't know. This live comes on. It's this guy, now Lieutenant Randy Sutton, or just retired Randy Sutton, Lieutenant. And he is doing, it's like mental health and policing. I'm like, oh, that's all right. So I click on that. And it's a story of if you remember the Orlando Pulse Club nightclub shooting. He was the first officer, I think, to get there. So he saw this horrendous chaos and hurt people, and everybody saw tough stuff. And he was kind of the first one. There's something to that, you know, when you're by yourself, and you know. Well, anyway, he's either trying to go out for PTSD or went out for PTSD, and they denied it. You know, says either it wasn't service connected or that they didn't, whatever.
Yeah.
I see it all the time. So it was just kind of this like 20-minute live of how can people do this to cops, and I'm going to stand up and fight for this. So I send this guy, Lieutenant Randy Sutton, who I don't know, I send him a message. Hey, man, like, you'll probably never even see this. It's a Facebook message, but, like, I just want you to know, like, this is what I do now, and I'm just telling you this happens everywhere. Like, in fact, this is kind of my story. Like, you know, they know what to do with me. I was a mess. They just kind of pushed me out the door. They're not going to be there for you when they say they're going to be there for you. I can prove it. You know, you can do your time and not get a pension. I'm living proof, you know? So immediately he's like, what's your phone number? Like, that's really weird. So he calls me, and just the fact that this guy he's also really famous on Cops TV. He was on like a bunch of Las Vegas episodes. So it was just kind of this surreal, not celebrity moment, but like, my life is weird.
Yep.
You know, my life is weird. So I'm talking to him. He's now the president and now executive CEO of the Wounded Blue, which he started to help injured officers. Well, anyway, he's a great dude. He's a good friend of mine now, somebody I consider a very close friend. And great dude. He's doing great things for cops that are hurt both physically and mentally. It's a great program I'm proud to be a part of as their clinical advisor. But the point of that was the medals, right?
Yep.
Here's this dude, like, you know, I don't know what level it's at. I don't know that if it rises to military silver stars, or, you know, but like whatever. But like, here's a dude with a wall full of medals, and now me too. 20 years later, because that was going to be the point of this, was he calls me and says, hey, I want you on my podcast. And so I do a podcast with him, and I was like, hey, man, I want to tell you a little story about you, because I tell him that, and I was like, there I was 20 years later sitting at my house drunk in front of the fire thinking, well, this is all bullshit, and I'm going to throw every one of these in the fire because I'm a piece of crap, and this is not who I am. Like, these aren't real. I don't deserve any of these. I got a little out of order on the story, but that to say, yes, I think it can be a trigger of like, oh, I got that medal when that horrible thing happened, and I'm having trouble dealing with it. I also think there's a massive piece to, look at all this. Yeah, I don't deserve any of these. I doubt he minds me using his name. We've talked before. I wouldn't dare say we're like close friends. We've had a couple conversations. Dakota Myers, a Medal of Honor recipient. Yep. I've talked to him just because he's from my home state. They made him an honorary trooper when he came back and got the Medal of Honor. So I've had a couple of contacts with him, is the extent. But one of the things he told me one time was, it's really hard to wear that Medal of Honor. He's proud of it. Yep. He did something crazy. I've read his book. I've heard his story. It's crazy, right? But what that Medal of Honor represents to him, again, paraphrasing, is not what he did. It represents the 8 guys that were killed, not by his fault. Anybody that reads that book's like, man, what a horrible thing this is. But he still blames himself for not being able to go and rescue them all, even to the fact that, they I can't remember if they may have been dead before he even got near them.
Some of them were, I believe.
Yeah, so, that's hard for him to have, like, that's the medal. Like, that's the cream of the crop. When you see that on somebody's uniform or a guy in his 80s jacket, you're like, that dude has seen some stuff right there, but to him, it's not even exciting because it's his 8 friends, So I could, it's a trigger both in the way that people may think of it, of like that ripping represents that horrible thing, and I don't like to think about it.
Right.
It also may be like, I don't deserve that.
More of a remembrance.
That's how it became for me after a while. It was, hey, I got multiple awards of this one, right?
Right.
And eventually it was like, like, yeah, but I'm nobody, and mine weren't even for, there's some life-saving ones, but mine weren't even for like a battle where my friends were lost,
Let's take a quick break, and then we're going to talk about life-saving in a moment.
Caleb House is a restoration house for trafficked children, but we are more than a collection of buildings. We are a family. We bring children in after they've been broken and abused, and we have them work with mental health therapists to overcome the trauma they've been through, jiu-jitsu instructors to help with anger and aggression, and of course the justice system to put the bad guys behind bars. But above all, we show the children the love of God, that God loves them, that He saved them, and that He wants the best for them. You can be a part of the Caleb House family by sharing our posts on social media through Facebook and Instagram, praying for the children and the team that works with them, as well as donating through our website, calebhouse.org. Every single one of these aspects is a critical part of the children's restoration. You are a blessing to the children.
All right, we are back from our break. Welcome back, everybody. I said we're going to talk about some life-saving stuff, but in the interim, we were talking about baptism, and one of the things that I was saying is that it's interesting to me how many people come to me and want me to baptize them, and that's a phenomenon for me. As if I have a monopoly on the Holy Spirit or the blood of Messiah. And for those who are watching, I do not. Okay, I'm just a conduit, and I would argue not even a great one at that. But I was talking about in Barnesville, Oklahoma, when Grindstone was deployed up there. It was the end of the day. We'd been up there. I think we were in Barnesville 3.5 or 4 weeks. We'd been getting after it, right?
Seemed like it, yeah.
Hot, sweaty. Just it's the end of the day. We're back at the fob. And I had just cracked a beer, right? And I don't drink a lot of beer here lately, empty calories or whatever, but been out running chainsaws all day and heavy equipment.
Tastes good.
Tastes good. I'm going to have a beer, right? So I just cracked a beer, and I sit down, and Kyle, who's our director of operations, comes out. We're outside the front of the fob, which is funny because there's a bunch of like militant-looking dudes drinking beer at the school gymnasium, which was our fob, but it's
still not the weirdest one, though.
Disaster zone. Yeah. Nobody cares. We're us, right? And so Kyle comes out and he's like, hey, just as an FYI, I know where there's some living water if anybody wants to get baptized. And my flesh was like, you have got to be kidding me. This is the last thing I want to do right now is go baptize. And even then, ego, right? Because I just got done saying I don't have to be the one to baptize people. In my brain, what I heard is now I have to go baptize people. Yeah. And so there was a guy who wanted to get baptized. And so Kyle pulls up Google Maps, and he's like, I know a spot. Well, we go to the spot. Turns out it's all the way private property. We're super duper trespassing in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. We're on a single lane dirt road. There's like 5 pickup trucks full of people. We have to do an about face. We end up going out to this county park. And it's beautiful. And I get in the water, and I don't know when I started doing this, but I go into the water first, and I get 2 handfuls of water, and I put it on my head and just kind of wipe it down over my face. And I do this every time, and it's almost like, hey, clean me with this water first so that my bullshit doesn't get in the way of what's about to go on here.
Yeah, it's
right?
good, yeah.
Take care of me first.
Yeah. Just get me out of the way.
Yeah, exactly, because it's not me, right?
Yep.
And so go in the water. This gentleman comes in the water, and I ask him, why do you want to be baptized? And he tells me, and I say, hey, let me pray for you. And he's like, okay. And it was amazing because the Spirit's flowing, and I end up praying. I've got him wrapped in my arms. I ended up praying an intercessory prayer for him, asking for forgiveness on his behalf for all the things that he wouldn't tell me eye to eye.
Oh, yeah.
And this guy, grown-ass man, melting in my arms, shaking, right? And I get done praying, and I put him in the water, and I bring him back up. And the father is doing all this, right? I'm just the guy. I'm the mechanism. Right? I'm the machinery, right?
Yeah.
You know? Bring him back up out of the water, and shofars are blowing, and it's beautiful. And I look up, and there's another guy. Okay, so we baptize him too. And I get done with him, and I look up, and there's another guy. And there's another guy. Mm-hmm. And we ended up baptizing 4 people that day. And we get done, and my heart and my mind are like completely renewed by this experience. It's like, damn you, weak flesh that didn't want to come out here and do this. You didn't want to do this. You know, it's like, this is amazing. What a beautiful, wonderful thing. But it's an interesting phenomenon for me now, being now an ordained pastor and being like, I don't flaunt it, right? But it's out there. People know it now, and they're like, I want Pastor Bear to baptize me. And I get that, because there's not a lot of people like us that are talking about faith, that are talking about how to try and walk this out. You feel like 2 dudes covered in tats, and, you know, like, we're us, right?
Not polo shirts behind us.
No,
stand.
So Trevor, what's
be
you
nice.
want to do with that?
Just be nice to people.
Love the sinner, hate the sin, like
nice.
that. So I get it, because, you know, your vibe attracts your tribe, right? And there are some people out there like us that would never let anybody else baptize them, and I get that too. But it's an interesting place to be. And so anyway, I just wanted to share that with everybody on the podcast, because that was topic of conversation during the break. You brought up you had, you know, multiple awards and citations for life-saving, and as you were saying that, it occurred to me, you used a refuge ankle kit at an MVA, didn't you?
It was the it was the IFAC.
It was the IFAC.
Yep.
You never gave me a debrief on that.
It's a pretty funny one, actually.
I'm gonna put you on the spot.
It's okay.
Now.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Well, and it's so comical. I should have written into you guys and just let it be part of the list, because I think some people think, and I'm probably guilty of this, like, oh, we didn't like save his life right there. But really the intervention probably, if there had not been intervention, he would have died. So it's actually a funny story. So we drop our oldest off at a birthday party, a young teenager birthday party. So we don't live in the city. Where my office is, the bigger city that's next to us in Lexington. And hey, we're in town, as we're on a couple errands, even though it's a Sunday afternoon. It's, you know, I don't really want to be doing this, but we'll go hit the big box stores that we need to hit or whatever on Sunday.
Right.
So, so I go to it was Best Buy. I go to Best Buy, and I'm looking for something electronic, and my wife needs something for a gift from Burlington Coat Factory. So she goes next door, and I'm a very fast shopper. If you don't have what I want, I'm out. I'm like, I need this, and this. I'm out of here. I got stuff to do. So I'm sitting in my truck. I'm waiting for her to call. So I'm gonna be a good husband and swing around, pick her up, you know, at the front of the store. Well, I hear this screaming. I can't remember if it's no or stop, but I hear this kid screaming, like blood curdling scream. But you could tell it was a kid. So honestly, man, like, I'm in this place in my life where I don't even look. I'm just like, somebody needs to control their kid, you know, like. 20 years ago, I'd been like, hey, I need to intervene in this. Now I'm like, whatever, you know. Well, it doesn't stop. And I'm kind of about to turn my head out the truck and be like, get control of your kid who didn't get the game he wanted or something, you know.
Right.
And there's a car parked there, and there's 2 dudes duking it out, man. Just 2 guys just going at it, punching each other. Well, I actually grabbed my camera, because I'm thinking, like, man, if one of them turns into a shooting or something, I at least want to have the tag number, you know.
Right.
They don't. They break up. The kid was screaming at them to stop. A couple of them get in the car, take off, and I'm like, oh, well, that didn't turn out as interesting as I thought it was going to be. Like, I'm probably not going to intervene on 2 guys just in a fist fight. I mean, I will if it's life-threatening, but, like, I doubt they just bumped into each other, you know? So our town is not unknown for its violence these days, you know? So it was two guys just going at it. So I kind of almost like turn back off again, like just waiting my wife. Well, this guy stumbles, the one that's walking stumbles across, and there's just blood just pouring down his face. And I'm like, ooh, that's pretty bad, but still, you kind of got yourself in that, you know? And he gets in the car right in front of me, and I'm like, still don't feel like like I want to be a good human and intervene, but like, you got to fight, dude. You're bleeding, you know, like, duh. Well, he doesn't move. And not only am I sitting in my car, but I have a dash cam on my truck because I don't trust people. And I'm like, dude, if this guy dies, I'm never getting out of here. Like, I know this isn't the thoughts that you think that a cop would want to jump in and help with, but literally I'm thinking like, I don't want like crime scene tape around my truck. I'm stuck here for hours. I got to pick up my kid. And he's just sitting there holding this stuff on his face. And he's just bleeding. I'm like, dadgummit. So I get out and I walk over to him. I actually took some paper towels. I have paper towels in the truck. And I was like, hey, man, you all right? Like, you need some paper towels? He goes, yeah, thank you. And he's holding it on his forehead.
Yep.
And I was like, listen, man, I don't say anything about being in the police in my background, you know, but I was like, hey, man, I used to be an EMT, which is completely true. And I was like, I don't know a lot, but do you want me to look at it and see, like, do you need to go to the hospital or is it stitches? He goes, yeah. So he takes it away and he shows it to me. And he has a chunk of his skull missing right here.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, it's like opened up, almost a circle. You can see parts of the white of the skull and then maybe some underneath.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm thinking like, dude, man, this guy brass knuckles, or I didn't see a weapon, but like you're in bad shape. Well, funny part, side note, my wife comes around the side of the truck looking at me like, what the hell? I've been calling you. Like, come pick me up. So she has to find me in the parking lot, right? So she wasn't mad, but she's coming like, what the? And her exact words are like, you better be performing a civil service or something. And I'm like, actually? So she comes over and I'm like, this is going to take a little more than these paper towels. So I just go get one of the bandages. So, you know, everybody thinks it's all tourniquets on a limb or all stuffing the bandages all the way in. Sometimes you save a life by just stopping the bleeding out of their head, you know, when it's their skull. And I'm sure it was more significant than that. Well, anyway, the other funny part was, so my wife has been a trauma nurse for 20 years. She's very good at her job, level 1 trauma center. And I was like, hey, man, do you want her to look at it? Like, she does this for a living, and she can tell you, like, do you need stitches, or is this something you can glue, or I don't know how that stuff works. He takes the thing away, and my trauma wife nurse goes, holy crap. And he's like, you think I need stitches? She said, no, I think you need surgery.
Wow.
Like, you have to go to the hospital. Because we were debating, like, you know, can we send him to the hospital? Can he drive? Should we call an ambulance? I really, really don't want to be involved in this, you know? So, anyway, she's like, no, you need like plastic surgery and part of your skull is, and so I call an ambulance and, I still, man, just it doesn't have to do with the helping the injury, but you'll appreciate. I just tell them like, hey, you've had a big fight here in front of Best Buy on this road. We're in this row. Like, I give them really good directions. Here's the car he's sitting in. She's like, okay, and what's your name, sir? And I said, I'm Mr. Don't Want to Be Involved. And she goes, all righty, we'll be there. Well, I know that the ambulance is going to get there first because the fire department's a block away. It's near my office. I know exactly where it is. And I knew PD's super busy. Fire's not going to come in until the PD does because it was called in as a fight, which hindsight, I should have just said he fell or something, you know, because the guy was gone. Suspect was gone. Well, the fire department and EMS pull up. And you talked about this on a recent podcast, I think, with Chad, about like how long it typically takes for an ambulance to get there.
Yep.
Well, the reason I say that, part of the story is I'm in a big city at this moment. Like, there is a fire department 2 blocks away, Station 15. I know it well. Love these guys. But they pulled up and had to sit a block away.
Yep.
You know, so they were 40-second response time. Dude, like 7, 8, 9 minutes goes by.
Yep.
And that's not a priority call for the like, they're going to get there, but it's not necessarily lights and sirens because the suspect's gone. And and I see the fire truck and ambulance, and I'm like, so I call again, and I'm like, hey, I called about this thing at Best Buy, and I know they're probably waiting. Oh, they drove off. That's what it was. The fire and EMS drove off. And I was like, no, I gave pretty good direction. So I called and I was like, hey, are they staging? Which is what they were doing. Are they staging, or like, can they not find us? And she said, no, PD's still en route. They're staging. I was like, oh man, I really don't want to get involved in this.
Yeah.
hey, I was a police officer for 18 years, 15 years, uniform law enforcement, formerly from the state police. Like, I know you can't take my word for it, but like the scene's secure. The guy, I have a video of the guy leaving,
Yeah.
you know, and I don't think I ever told her I had a video, but like, I know the guy left. He was in this color car. He was, and she goes, as much as I appreciate that, they're still not going to come in till the PD gets there. And I'm like, all right, I just thought I'd throw that out there. She goes, I could tell you were something with the first time you called. Cause I said 4th aisle, 3rd car, you know, instead of just like somewhere in the city is a guy that's hurt. Well, anyway, I'll wrap this story up, but yeah, I mean, I used part of the IFAC to kind of, I mean, definitely stop the bleeding. I don't know if we saved his life in 40 seconds, but as long as the ambulance, that dude would have bled out for sure.
Oh,
I mean, he was raining blood, you know, he would have bled out for sure if somebody hadn't intervened and used parts of the kit, you know, and because PD got there and, yeah, so here's the end of the story, which I think is the best part. So we're standing there. He decides to go with the EMS, which is a good idea. And I'm like, good, let's get out of here before we get wrapped up in some paperwork. And my wife said, hey, just how did that happen? What did he hit you with? Like, we're not the police. What did he hit you with? Like brass knuckles or he goes, no, he bit my head off.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So they're fighting and the guy leans over and bites his skull off of his head.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, find that guy.
Yeah. So the funny thing was the PD guy that gets there, and I've done all their in-service classes and stuff, so I at least know them. I may not know them all individually. And I was like, man, I really don't want to get involved in this. But like, if you were looking for part of his head, it might be over there.
Oof.
Right? Like, so we both went and looked and couldn't find it. So that dude either took it with him or, I don't know, somewhere out there is a big circle of meat and skull.
Gosh, that's nasty.
Yeah.
That's why I carry hollow points.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm glad it didn't turn to that because I would have been stuck there in the parking lot for the next 3 hours. But,
Yeah,
you know,
well,
like
if some guy tries to bite a chunk out of my skull, I'm all the way shooting him.
100%.
All the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to ruin your Sunday, but I am shooting this guy.
Well, there's probably a reason that we got into it, and it's probably not my attitude. So, you know, like, I'm in a place in my life I don't start too many fights anymore, you know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm already in my 40s, and, you know, I always say I already wake up now and think, like, did I hurt something in the gym, or is just this the way I am now? Yeah. You know, so if I can avoid it, I will.
Yeah, baseline body pain. Yeah, just roll out of bed.
Yeah, I helped one of your employees move while I was here this week, which is it's always every time I come down here, it's something. You know, I always bring extra clothes because I know we're gonna do something. You know, and I didn't get to help a lot, but I helped them some. And I went to the hotel like, man, I don't feel 20 anymore.
No,
like,
man,
this is terrible.
When I was a young man, all the old men would tell me, like, you know, lift with your legs, not with your back. Take care of your body, son. You know, you're not going to have it forever. And I would always think, like, all right, old man, whatever. Now I'm like, the fact that they were as civil as they were at that age, because, like, I don't know that I could beat the shit out of 20-year-old me, but I want to. Yeah. Like, that kid was such an asshole.
I know everything. So yeah, it was a long story, but that's how I finally got to use my bear fac, you know.
Praise God.
So
that's awesome.
Worked great. Did exactly what it needed to do.
They actually work. So it's not just propaganda.
It does actually work. Yeah. Every piece of it. You know, every piece of it works. You know, because I've trained in it with refuge. So,
wow. I appreciate that. Yeah. That the training side is one of the things that I think a lot of people miss. You know, possession versus proficiency. And when we started Refuge early on, it became obvious to us that it would be criminally negligent if we didn't provide training. It'd be, to my mind, it's like having a gun shop but not teaching people how to shoot, you know, because I don't want people to possess the kits and then not know how to use them, because that doesn't actually help anybody. So we started our Refuge training, and we actually have a huge training event coming up right now in September that by the time this comes out, it'll be sold out. I think there's like 2 slots left as of right now.
Well, and to your testament, not only is it huge, and granted, you've got kind of direct access to a psychotherapist, but you guys have also taken part of this and put mental health and what happens in a trauma, both from those of you that have done it, those of us that have been in it, but also from a psychological standpoint. Like I've had conversations with your training guys about
Yep.
Here's what you might see. Here's what they may be dealing with. Here's something interesting to watch for that you may not see, but is really happening. You know, that to me, I don't know. I'm sure there are companies doing something similar out there in the world. There's a lot of, there's other trainers of different things.
Yep.
But I love that they called and asked that, like, what should we be watching for here?
Yeah.
It's not just tourniquets and night vision.
No, it's scenario-based training. And the idea, so we've had people who have come to refuge training and who have then gone on to use their kits to intervene and save lives in the field, who have called us afterwards and said, training was more stressful than the real thing. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I want to build that automaticity into people that when the real thing happens, you just go into action. You just handle the problem. It's stress inoculation, right? And so running this overnight scenario, which is there's going to be about 15 students on the ground. They'll be broken into fire teams. And then there's, I believe, 28 role players in cadre. And we've got Naval Special Warfare, U.S. Army Special Forces, Marine Corps veterans, all coming in teaching different portions of this. And then as well as Op4 and role players. And there's a decision tree. There's multiple decision trees in this. So as there's a scenario, right? They have to patrol in. There's objectives they have to accomplish while they're in the field. While they're on the playing field, right? And they'll be given an in-brief and an intel packet and the whole nine. But how they interact with some of the neutral players on the field determines what happens next. And that's really interesting.
That's cool, yeah.
And so what we want to do is simulate an actual realistic, okay, it's SHTF, right? And some of your people have gone missing. Now what?
Wow.
Right? And it's in the
That's a lot to
dark.
think about, yeah.
And we know that there's bad people in the area, but there's also unknown players in the area. And so how you navigate the psychological aspect of how do I navigate this unknown person in a stressful environment in the middle of the night? If you mess up this relationship, it could go super south for you, right? And so we want to play brain games with people because SHTF or whatever is stressful, right? Just after hurricanes and tornadoes, when we do grindstone stuff, those people are stressed out and sleep deprived.
I was telling Bob, your COO, right? I was telling Bob, everybody's trauma is valid. Like whoever comes in, it could be like a Medal of Honor recipient that comes to my office, and then a stay-at-home soccer mom that is dealing with something like your trauma is relevant to you. I don't judge trauma. There's no hierarchy. When it comes to the psychology side, there's no like your thing is your thing. Your trauma is your trauma. Because to me, it all goes back to that umbrella of belief system, right? That filter system. But man, the counsel world will hate me for saying this. But I don't think everybody that thinks they've been in fight or flight's ever been in fight or have all been in fight or flight, right? And that's not to take away how scary things were, how dangerous it felt, but like those of us that have been in true fight or flight, doesn't make us any better. In fact, sometimes it's our own mistake for being there, right? Until you see it, you don't see it, right? And again, that doesn't in any way invalidate the pain and the stress and the trauma that people go through. And what I'm saying is not to degrade anybody's trauma, but until you train for that, that, till you truly are in as close as physically possible to this chaos of, one of the things that I'm no military trainer, wasn't in the military, but my brother-in-law, who I highly respect, just retired, Marines for 30 years, E9. And I respect those guys a lot, and especially that branch. I respect all of them, but that branch especially, my brother's in it. My family members have been in it, but their training is still wartime indoctrination. Right? Like, I love how their boot camp is, right? They still call it that for a reason, right? Because, and the other branches do a very similar thing, but they're known for, high levels of stress. One of the 3 academies I've been through, because there's something wrong with my head, was very high level stress like that, right? And I got to know how you'll perform. I need to honestly know. And I know that you've got all the cool gear, and I know that you've been to the trainings, and I know that you have thought about through this stuff in your head. Maybe you've really gone far in being prepared for when it hits the fan, right? But you've never been there, right? And you may perform amazingly and you may fall apart, right? So I don't know that there is a way to be exactly in fight or flight unless you know your life's in danger. But if you're adding that much chaos, the chaos was the important thing to me that I was picking up on. Like, fight or flight's chaos. It's not thinking things through. Fight or flight is absolute chaos. When I was in fight or flight in my career, I was not thinking how to draw my weapon out of the holster. I specifically remember to this day in one of those events, I do not remember drawing my weapon. I'm pretty sure I did because it was in my hand, but I was looking at sight, picture, and trigger squeeze is what I was thinking, right? I wasn't thinking anything other than save my life, right? Or save somebody else's life.
So they'll have 2 days of training with Refuge before this night exercise, which is important because crawl, walk, run. The night exercise is a blank fire exercise. And so both the students and the OPFOR will have blank fire, and including some spicy pieces of equipment. And part of that, honestly, is building off of what we personally have done. See, our training cadre also trains a lot. We also train a lot. And we were blessed about a year ago, got a buddy of ours who came to us and was like, hey, I'm over here training with these guys from NSW. You want to come out and play? Yeah, that sounds like fun. Let's go play. And so we started playing in the woods with NSW and learned a ton, because it's one thing to like, hey guys, let's sit around in the team room with the whiteboard and talk about how it's going to be. Dude, when you're getting maneuvered on by a couple of A-dubs, by guys who do this professionally, it's a whole nother world now. And it's a blast. Like, we've had tons of fun doing that. It's an absolute blast. Learned a ton of shit. And so to be able to take some of that and some of those reputations that we built within that community and then bring that over to the RT side, Refuge Training, and go, okay, now let's put together a block of instruction for our people. You don't get that on the civilian side. Like a deep 12-hour scenario-based team exercise in the dark, I don't know anybody else is doing that, you know? And so what we're trying to, what we found with so many people that have come to RT afterwards, there's almost a spiritual element to it, because there's an element of overcoming. We make you do things that you didn't know that you could do. And then afterwards you survive through it, right? We induce that fight or flight, like open door, which is one of the scenarios we run in Refuge Responder. I won't give the scenario away, but it's an open door. Somebody you love is on the inside. Figure it out, right? We have had big, tough guys like you and me break down in tears after that and had to pull them aside and counsel with them because of the psychological effects of this, to where everybody thinks they know how they're going to perform until they do it. And then, you know, that fight or flight, it's like, are you going to run towards the problem or away from it?
And how chaotic were you afterwards? Were you able to see how chaotic that was?
Oh, yeah.
You know, how many times have been a true critical life-threatening incident? And somebody else says something like, well, that guy did this. I'm like, was he there? I didn't know he was there. I mean, obviously, when we slow down and put all the pieces together, you got, and I won't give it away, but I know you guys do a scenario in a restaurant type setting. And just hearing that one, when you guys put it together and we're looking at all the pieces of it, just hearing that one, I was almost like, oh man, like, dude, I don't think I'd put that scenario like in my head. I'm sure I've run through that type of thing again. I don't want to give any of it away, but like, man, I might pause for a second, you know, on that one.
One of the best pieces of body cam footage I've seen in a long time, it was a guy, I think he was a sergeant, and he was undercover, and if I'm remembering this correctly, he's watching a drug deal go down. He intervenes. He gets shot the hell up. Like he's laying on the ground, and I think one of his arms was broken. And he had a bunch of close cover. So other officers come running in. They subdue the one suspect immediately. They chase down the other suspect. And he's laying on the ground, bleeding out. And some of his guys come running up to him. And he's working the radio with his chin, right?
Oh yeah.
And his demeanor was so good. He's talking to his guys. He's like, look, I'm hit multiple times. I know I'm hitting the leg. Go ahead and get tourniquets on my legs first because that's my biggest vessels. All right, yep, and his guys are screaming, who's got more tourniquets? I got tourniquets in the truck. Blah, blah, blah. He's like, hey, I got a tourniquet on me. Get that one on my leg. Okay.
Wow.
Get another tourniquet on my other leg. Okay, good. Now, check my arms. Arms are good. He goes, one of my arms is definitely broken. Get a tourniquet on that. Okay. Go ahead. You got the one suspect, and he's laying on the ground bleeding out, right? And he's like, you got the one suspect? Good. All right. The other guy took off to the west. He's behind those buildings over there. Make sure 2 of you go over there, not just one of you. Don't go just running in, right? And he's like, okay, now expose me for wounds. Go ahead and call us into EMS. And it was golden. Cool. The fact that he kept his head that level.
Such respect.
Oh, man, it was beautiful to see that.
Yeah.
And that's you could tell that guy has been through some shit and has trained.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we want is to train people and put people through some shit because most people are not exposed to that kind of stuff.
I think we forget that sometimes. I think those of us that kind of live in the world of either public safety, training, tier 1 guys, you know, like we have I guess we call him mutual friend that we met through actually, a tier 1 guy, you know, kind of famous on the internet. And that guy just thinks differently than other people, you know? And now what I love about that guy is he doesn't tell a lot of stories. He's got a lot of stories because I learned from him, like, don't rest on your laurels. What are you doing today? Which I've always had respect for. Not that all their stories aren't important. I want to hear them. You know, I love listening to those podcasts. To me, it's a little more psychological than you know, it used to be kind of fanboy, the shooting and that's interesting to hear. But man, some of those interviews with tier 1 guys, to me, it's always the second half of the interview where their life fell apart. Afterwards, man, that it goes really what you're talking about of we've all thought. I'll tell you a quick one that ties into this. I got a friend who used to be the sheriff of a western Kentucky county, and he had not been in law enforcement before he was elected sheriff. And he was in the community, but he just was never law enforcement. His son was a great trooper, still is. And so he gets elected sheriff, and sheriffs in Kentucky do not have to go to the academy. Their deputies do. But if you're an elected sheriff, you don't have to go through the certification. He put himself through it. He said, nope, if my guy's got to do it, I'm going to do it. I want to know what the job is.
Respect.
So, right? So, and that's the kind of guy he is. So he goes to the academy, and within, I don't want to misspeak, 30, 60, 90 days, somewhere really fast after the academy, is involved in a shooting a domestic, has to shoot and kill a guy. And how I got to know him, I didn't know at the time, how I got to know him was, he's not a client, that's why I can tell the story, is I met him through a critical incident seminar, and he likes to tell this story, so it's fine. He gives us all permission to do so. And he said that he called the academy, a pretty well-respected supervisor there that everybody knows, and said, hey, I got to compliment you on something. You guys told me exactly what that shooting was going to be like. I was prepared. I knew what decision to make. I knew when to pull. I knew sight picture. Like, I did not hesitate. It never crossed my mind what was happening there. I saw problem, solve problem. You guys did an amazing job preparing me for that. You didn't do shit for what happens afterwards. He's like, and my life fell apart.
Wow.
You didn't do anything to prepare me for the rest of it. Right. And I tell that story because I hear it's so calm, and I just like the way he tells it, you know, and he's a very well respected guy. So when he said it, he's one of those guys that you're like, okay, we've got a problem here. He's not complaining. He's not just complaining. Here's a guy that a lot of people respect in public safety and still do. And now he tries to help with mental health. He's moved on since being the sheriff, but tries to help with public safety, mental health still to this day, well invested in it. And when a guy like that who's been there, done that, says it, you know, it lands differently than somebody who's just as important, but maybe hasn't quite been there, and is making waves about how bad it is.
Right.
Still, their input's absolutely important. But when you got a guy that's like, let me tell you what actually happens, and we all go, oh shoot. Now some good programs have come from that. Which is how I know that story. But yeah, like, you know, you guys had me completely ready for the shooting. Like, I was ready for that stress. Afterwards, I had no idea what I was getting myself into.
Wow.
Yep. Which is where that's where my life comes in, right? That's where I come in of the aftermath.
So you work predominantly with current and former military and law enforcement, right? First responders.
Yes, and it'll fluctuate in percentage. Like sometimes 50% of my client load is that, sometimes 80 or 90.
Right.
I've gotten a lot lately of not those people, but people that have been through similar difficult things in their life. And I still attract a lot, sometimes I just attract type A people that are just, just dealing with some stuff, life stuff, but when it comes to like the trauma, I seem to attract a lot of public safety military. Yep.
And you're licensed in Kentucky, but you have a coaching program internationally, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I can't do therapy outside of the states that I'm not licensed in.
Right.
Obviously, anybody can look at that. Now, there is an interstate compact coming. It's just been coming for a long time. It's a government thing. But so what I created the online stuff was because kind of like you with refuge, right? Here's a problem that needs to be solved. How do I solve it? I'm going to start looking outside the box and putting pieces together. So people were calling me from out of state saying, I need your help. And early on, you can't do therapy, outside your state. You're going to get sued. You're going to lose your license. I should tell them, like, sorry, man, you got to come here. There for a while, I started a program of intensive programs. It's actually created by Dr. Hurley that I worked with. And he actually did a published study on it. It's pretty interesting. But you have them come to you for 10 days, 5 days, twice a week. And then you do 2 90-minute sessions a day.
Okay.
For those 10 days, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Insurance won't cover intensives. You're going to be out significant amount of cash, significant to me anyway, especially if you're a cop or,
4 figures.
Easily. Yeah.
Okay.
Easily. Yeah. Yeah. Not much more than that, but yeah, easily in the 4 figures, because you gotta, if even you just break down the number of times you see somebody times a reasonable amount, it gets up there. Plus hotel, you got to pay for hotel, you got your food for 2 weeks, can you be away from work? Can you be away,
Right.
And I've seen a lot of great things happen in those intensives, but one, it's super expensive, and I work with cops and military. We don't have a lot of cash. We just don't, insurance won't cover it. And me rearranging the schedule for my regular clients was getting really tough.
Right.
So I still do them once in a while. I kind of reserve them for like extreme cases where they have to get here now. And even now, then it's hard to do because I got to schedule some things. But I try to save that because it's really good. Dr. Hurley's able to show a lot of growth systematically, very statistically significant way. But in the research, it just wasn't working for people, that they couldn't do that. If you're trying to feed your family of 4 and you don't have any PTO left, and if you take another day off, they're going to can you, can you do that? Maybe there's an argument that it's worth it to come get help and then fix your life, but people aren't going to do it. So
you're almost inducing rock bottom though.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right.
Well, look at the hierarchy of needs, right? You know, like obviously the most important thing is not money, but if you don't have any, you might not get mentally a lot better. You're at least not going to be in that space you want to be in, right? Like money's not everything. Most of the time it's your spending, not your income, but but you're not going to get in a place, especially if we take your income away.
Right.
Like I appreciate the people willing to sacrifice and do that, but, and sometimes you just have to do it to make everything's better. You got to do what you promised you do and get better. But so I was like, how can I reach people outside of this arena of just coming to my office while also being respectful of the laws and the rules? And so originally I just started putting stuff online, just tried to get some info out there. I thought maybe get me some speaking gigs, which it has. You and I met through a kind of a tier 1 mutual friend.
Yep.
And I think I won't speak for you, but I think we were both there to kind of learn like some social media coaching, some like, hey, these guys are really doing really well on social media. I like the other stuff too that they're doing, and you spoke first, and listened to your story. And then you said earlier, I went second. And one of the questions I asked him was like, hey, here's what I'm wanting to do. Kind of told that story. Here's what I'm wanting to do. And when should I start my YouTube channel? Like, how do you know when? And both you and CJ, the other guy was like, now, like just turn on the camera, do it now.
Immediately.
And I promise you, you'll do terrible. Like you're going to look like an idiot. I did my first one like my camper because it was nice and quiet and calm. And I look back and I'm like, that production quality's tough. Not that I'm much better now, but like it was rough then, you know. But okay, so start putting information out there. Maybe some people could take something from it, which I hope they do, and I get to hear through text and through messages that they do. And even if that's all they need, that's great, you know. Well, it was still like I need to work with you. You seem to understand me. You speak differently than these other therapists. I got a message just this week of like, what do I do when I hate all all the therapists that I went to, and they just see that they're just plying me along to make me feel better and take my money. And I'm like, I had to tell them like, I'm sorry, man. A lot of our profession sucks. Yeah. You know, like it just, I don't think they're bad people or nefarious people per se. It's just nobody bothers to train past day one, you know, and I would be massively embarrassed if I had to tell you, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
There are probably times where I might have to get a little better at your specific thing because it's new, but I would be so embarrassed if I'm like, I don't know, you're screwed, I guess. Jeez, go find somebody else. I won't do it. So I started putting stuff out there, kind of finish your question. I started putting stuff out there, and then I ran into a couple of instructors for REBT, the other type of therapy I use. And he's making a video, and he said, "Yeah, just reach out to me. I do therapy nationally and internationally." And I'm like, "What? That's not fair. Like, we get the same license. That's not. What are you doing?" So I called him, and he said, "I don't do therapy. I do consulting and education. I can't do therapy with you,
Right.
but I can give you all the tools you need to go forth and apply this, you know,
Right.
so that you get the same result of, oh, okay, I just figured, okay, yeah. And then I was still a little nervous about it. And, you know, please, if you're a counselor and you're listening, please do your own research. Don't take legal advice from me. But, you know, but then I'm like, I'm watching all these coaches, life coach, no certification. Like, what's going on? You know, how does this work? And there's great ones out there. There's also horrendous ones out there. Yeah, horrendous ones out there. And that are going to get themselves in a bag of tricks, not knowing what to do with a client one of these days, you know. And I was like, man, but I'm still leery about teaching about EMDR, teaching about these. You know, is that therapy? Well, so I went back to a book that I read years and years ago by Francine Shapiro, which is who created EMDR. It's called Getting Past Your Past. And I'm listening to it in my truck. I've read it before. I've listened to it. I always like to, you know, update myself. And she's talking about teaching people how to do some EMDR. You know, like let's not massively process a horrendous thing by yourself.
Right.
You know, like maybe you need to find somebody. But hey, man, here's some things where maybe you can take these skills that we've learned about AIP, about the adaptive information processing model, about EMDR, and you know, and help.
Yeah.
You know, and so that became my willingness to do some consulting and education online. You know, insurance doesn't cover that stuff, unfortunately, because it's not therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do therapy per se like that. But I'm sure anybody that's on an ethics board has just peed themselves and tried to look up my name. So, but they can
come see me first.
Yeah. But I'm not trying to skate the system. But all this goes back to the fact that I can't help enough people fast enough.
Yeah, I feel that.
Like you do great things, and I know you feel that. You know, when you do hear those stories, we had I won't say where, just because it's so fresh for people. We had a deputy in Kentucky, take his life last week on duty with his service weapon. So, and no matter what the story is, no matter what the pieces are, irrelevant to the fact that it still happened, you know, so it happens all the time. In fact, I think that happens at least 3 times more than we know about.
Yeah.
There's some numbers in the hundreds that the problem is you can go on the Department of Justice website right now and find out how many crimes have happened, where, their race, their age, where it happened at. You can look at motives sometimes. You can look up amounts of theft. You can put your street in and find out all the crimes that have ever happened there. Right. There's nowhere you can go online and search number of suicides of law enforcement. Right. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, nobody wants to talk about it. Right. Two, nobody wants to talk about it because you got these idiots that say things like they know what they signed up for. And like, listen, when I was 21 years old, I didn't know what I was signing up for. Like, I signed up for the willingness to do some stuff. I did not know the amount of graphic, horrendous things I was going to see. Right. I was willing to do it. Right. But if you think you know, those people are fools. That's one of the most uneducated, ignorant comments I hear people say. Is they knew what they were signing up for. I promise you they didn't. I promise you, right? So, so nobody wants to talk about it. There's no database for it. Now, there are some companies out there that are trying, like some nonprofits are trying to gather those numbers. The problem is it's self-reported, right? So there has to be a suicide, and somebody from the agency has to call and say, hey, we did have a suicide. We think it's related to public safety, whether it's on duty or off. And here's the other side is, and I don't blame people for this necessarily, but it's a reality of counting these numbers. You know, when people say things about the statistics of law enforcement suicide, and we don't know, because let's say that you're the chief of a 2-man department and I'm your deputy, right? And we've known each other for 30 years, man. We've risked our life together. And yeah, we're not a busy city, but some stuff has come through, man. We've been in some stuff, you know, and I trust you, and you know my kids and my family, and my wife calls and says, hey, I think he just shot himself in the garage or something horrendous, right? And you go there and you're the chief, you know, so you're in charge of this, and you know that if he shot himself in the garage off duty, she gets nothing.
Yep.
She gets nothing, and now he is to some people, weak.
Yeah.
Or whatever word you want to use, right? But if it happened on duty and it was an accidental discharge while cleaning his gun, and I'm not recommending this, it's not legal advice, but I know this happens.
Yep.
If he was on duty, you had called him, there's no record, but you had called him and said, hey, man, I need you to get 10-8, I need you to get on duty, you know? And only you know otherwise. And he's like, yeah, I got to grab my stuff. I was cleaning my gun, and he had an accidental discharge in the garage. That's an on-duty death, and his family's going to get covered medically and financially, and he'll be more of a hero. And, you know, I mean, I don't think that happens often, and I don't think you can do that in a lot of places. But tell me that doesn't happen. Tell me it doesn't happen. I'll laugh in your face. I've seen it happen, right? And of course, to what harm, you know, would be the argument. You know, like, did it really cost you more tax dollars? No, they're going to other countries.
Well, forsake not the widow and the orphan.
Yeah. So, and he saved your life one time 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's a shame that they'd have to report it in such a way that the widow and the orphan isn't forsaken. Yep. But I understand.
So now that's an accidental, sad thing that this knucklehead cop should have known better, right? Instead of he shot himself. Right. So it's massively underreported, I think, by at least 33%.
Yeah.
You know, and probably more than that. We keep statistics, and we do really good at training you for the things that we know are killing cops: the driving, the shootings, the fighting. Right. And we do a good job, and I want us to keep doing a good job at that. But that's in the hundreds.
Right.
We're talking about multiple hundreds of law enforcement officers that are taking their own life, and maybe they're. Well, and I would say probably psychologically, there is probably a component of outside law enforcement life that's adding to it, right? Mm-hmm. It is, in my opinion, pretty rare that it was a call and you're just a mess from that.
Right.
It does happen. I promise you it happens. I see it. It's not the high percentage of what I see.
Well,
you know?
I think, so my unprofessional opinion, I'm not the doctor in the room, but when it comes to suicide, at least in my mind, it's always been from a lack of options. Yeah. So like there's everything is so messed up everywhere I go. There is no good anymore. Mm-hmm. And so maybe the only way to deal with this situation is to not participate in it anymore. Right.
Yep.
And so I would concur that there have to be factors outside of law enforcement as well, where there's no safe place to turn to. And so that's it. I'm taking myself off the playing board.
Well, I've always said suicide comes from hopelessness. I'll give you one more, though. Man, this one hit me like a ton of bricks when I learned it or thought of it or got put some pieces together and thought of this. From part of it comes from a friend of mine who did try to take his life after an injury, and they've kind of added to it. But your job in the public safety of the military is to take out the threat.
Yep. Who's
the threat?
Yeah.
You are.
Yep.
I'm the threat now. I'm the one causing my family the problem because of something stupid I did and the lawsuit that's, I'm the one that's spent all the money. I'm the one that stepped out of my marriage. I'm the one that got into the DUI wreck, when I didn't reach out for help. I'm the one that Oh, so I'm the piece of shit in this scenario? Handled.
Yeah.
Now, everybody rationally knows that's not going to fix a problem, right?
Right.
It's a long-term solution to a short-term problem, right? It's not going to fix the problem. You leave far more damage in your wake than you were doing, even being a piece of crap,
Yep.
you know, if you were. But I think there's a big piece to that because one of the things that I deal with, and this has been a big area of study of mine lately, because I want to know everything about this. A vast majority of my clients will tell you they're not depressed or anxious. They're numb.
Yep.
Right? Compassion fatigue is one word for it, you know, that I think we've looked into a little bit. I think that's a big piece of it, but numb is what most of my people say. Numb and anger are the two that come together, right? I don't have a lot of clients, and this is my pool I'm pulling from, but I don't have a lot of clients that are just massively depressed in public safety. It does happen, especially outside factors, right? But most are just numb, and if they're depressed, it's because they feel like they're broken and can't, you know, they're not intimate, and they're not, except for taboo, you know, ways of being intimate, that high riskness, you know, they wish that they could have more emotion, they wish they could love their wife more or whatever, which treat their kids better or different. Well, so one of the things I always explain, and the reason becoming, I want to understand better the neurology side of this, and I'm always willing to admit that I'm always learning. I don't know everything, but when I look at happiness and sadness, I see on like a continuum scale, a line, right? Happiness is on this side, sad's on the other, and right in the middle of happy and sad is numb. And numb's safe. It's not healthy, but it's numb. It's neither, right? It's, you know. One piece of this before I explain the continuum is, you know, why do we have, there's times we have to be numb. There are times that I have to, what idiot goes into a burning building?
Right.
What idiot goes into a building where the alarm's going off and the door's clearly kicked in and it's you by yourself?
Right.
And there could be somebody in there hiding in the corner that you'll never see. I don't care how good your search technique, you're well-versed in search techniques. There is no perfect way to do it, especially by yourself in the middle of nowhere, right? So there are times you have to be. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with calling upon my numbness to go do big things, right? Well, on this side of numb is the bad, right? And it's incremental. The time I broke my leg, the time I wrecked my car, all down to the really bad stuff, right? And on this side of good, and it's incremental as well. The time I fell in love and the time I got married and, like, you know, big stuff. And the really happy stuff down at the other end. Christmas and having kids and, you know. Well, we don't want this. The really negative. The problem is the brain doesn't know the difference really between plus and minus. It doesn't know good from bad per se. It knows serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine. I'll give you an example. How come sometimes things that are good and accepted here are bad and unaccepted in other cultures? Right? Yes, there is some early learned morality of not wanting to hurt other people when you're a kid, but the reality is that most of it's we've decided what's good and bad, right? So the brain just knows norepinephrine and adrenaline and dopamine and serotonin, right? That's why bad things feel good sometimes. So to get rid of this, because there's no plus or minus, I say it's kind of like old traffic radar, old police traffic radar. You just got speed reading, right? You could use the Doppler tone and your observation to figure out who it was, but it didn't tell you if the traffic is coming towards you. I could hear that in the Doppler audio. It's just plus or minus, just a speed. Well, the brain is just a speed, no plus or minus. So to get rid of this, we have to get rid of this. And most of us that have done these jobs are willing to get rid of, all right, so I don't cry at movies anymore. And maybe I could treat my kids a little better, or I should go to all 6 plays instead of 4. You know what it like, but I'm just not the giddy, happy, excited all the time anymore. But I'm okay. That seems like a fair sacrifice. But you do that over 20 years of public safety.
All that's left is numb.
Or you start that at 7 because dad used to beat me and I never could go home and have good, so I always had bad. All that's left is numb. And part, whether it's compassion fatigue from the burnout, whether it's that way that I've kind of put that idea together, you still end up at numb. Now, not everybody's solution for this is going to be the same, but I can tell you what the solution is. How to get there is different for everybody. If I want some good back, I have to be willing to get some bad back. And that doesn't mean I dwell on the bad, right? But good, I can kind of force my way into, like, hey, I'm here with my friends this week. This has been kind of nice, you know? but so I can kind of force a little bit of happiness, but it slaps right back to numb as soon as you're done. So I have to be willing to let my brain, my body, whatever, have a little bit of shittiness. Hey, shittiness I can handle though. And I think that kind of, if there's no plus and minus, it must be opening up it must open up the other way of like, you know what? I usually would have lost my shit right there usually. But you know what? That concert was kind of fun.
Is there something to willingly subjecting oneself to hardship on the bad side of the scale, like say through discipline, right? Like get up at 4 a.m. and go to the gym whether you want to or not, as far as the badness is concerned, that helps you enjoy stuff on the positive side of the spectrum.
Yeah, and the mechanism may be different for everybody, but here's what I definitely believe, and I think we've shown this in numerous different ways in research, in the literature, that I'm a student of psychotherapy, right? I've kind of settled on REBT and EMDR because they changed my life. They fit the people that I talk to. I wholeheartedly believe in the philosophies of those two modalities, so it makes it a lot easier for me to teach and do. And I see it fit everywhere. But I also studied tens, hundreds of other ones, whether it be through college, whether it be through looking at them, And one of the things that they all agree upon in differing ways, one of the things that almost every modality agrees upon is you have to have some exposure to the bad in order to get through the bad, right? Whether that's exposure therapy, which I don't recommend for everybody except for in certain circumstances, it gets overused too much. Whether it's EMDR, EMDR is not making the bad good. Right. It's being willing to sit there in the bad for a short amount of time with that effect and let your brain go. We're okay. Yeah. We're all right. I feel a weight off my shoulder. I'm not happy, but okay, I feel a little hope now.
Stress inoculation.
Yeah, and so for some people it may be physical labor. For some people it may be, hey, I got through the illness, I'll get through this one. For some people it may be, whether that's physical stress inoculation like me going to the gym. I don't go to the gym. I'm not competing anymore. Right. I go to the gym, one, because I like to be bigger and stronger. But I go to the gym so I don't kill people, I go to the gym to get that out,
I do.
Yeah. So whether it's that kind of stress inoculation, whether it's having to sit in some of those things by whatever trained therapy or therapist you're using or whatever, they all agree you got to expose yourself to it a little bit. You've got to be able to get your brain to go, we're all right. Yep. We'll be all right for the next one. My wife hates when I'm really good about just going to bed, even if I'm anxious. I'll have a night or two once in a while, but I'm pretty good about just turning it off, going to bed when it's time. One of it is I work until the moment I got it. I'm not a good representation of don't work all the time, but you're a business owner. There is no clock. So my wife hates it when I say like, listen, your problem's at 10 p.m. or your problem's at 8 a.m. Go to sleep.
Yep.
And she's like, no. She likes to lay there and think about it, come to the solution. I don't think that makes me better or healthier per se. It's just a thing I wanted to point out of that comes from me going, all right, we'll figure this out in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, okay, the bank's red right now and I got payroll in 3 days. I don't know how we're going to do it, but me laying here staring at the ceiling is not going to help.
Yeah.
So I'm going to set my alarm early and go to the gym. And I'll be damned if I don't get a little sleep and go to the gym. But halfway through the gym, I'm thinking like, ooh, I got an idea. I got an idea here.
Grindstone Ministries is the hands and feet of the Father in the face of disaster. We charge into the aftermath of tornadoes and hurricanes, dedicated to restoring shattered communities with grit and grace, one debris pile at a time. Our mission is to save lives, empower, and uplift those impacted, rebuilding homes and teaching love through action amidst chaos. Through strategic disaster relief efforts and unwavering commitment, we forge a path towards resilience and hope, ensuring that no community faces devastation alone. Donate now at grindstoneministries.com.
So, last thing, this has been a great conversation.
Oh, always, man.
When you're even more famous and esteemed in your particular line of work, and you start doing brain scans of people, I want you to scan my brain while I'm playing drums.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when the doc that I had talking about that bilateral stimulation, I asked him when I first walked into his office, and he had two chairs kind of facing each other, and he had a table next to his chair, and there was a copy of a Bible right there. Like right there, and well used, right? It wasn't just like a fixture of the room. Yeah. And oh my gosh, don't break our shit, man.
I bet that
we worked hard
so
on this
loud.
set.
I bet that sounded so loud.
Dudley will get it in post. Hey, listen to 3.5 hours of footage just so you can cancel that out. But I said, "You read the Bible?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Cool, me too." He said, and it was such an interesting question. He says, "Who is Jesus to you?"
Ooh, okay.
And I was like, well, that's an interesting place to start. And so
you especially.
yeah, for me especially, right? And so anyway, we continue our conversation, and because the first meeting was a lot of ass sniffing on both sides,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And I said, so he explains what EMDR is, and the bilateral stimulation, and kind of moving stuff from the today folder to the long-term storage.
Yeah.
And I said, are there any other circumstances, because he brought up REM sleep, there are any other circumstances that you know of where this happens? And he said, well, and I'm paraphrasing what he said a few years ago, so maybe I'm remembering wrong. He said there is some study to indicate that when people pray, both sides of their brain light up at the same time.
Yeah.
I said, that's really interesting. And I said, I could tell you one that's probably not on your radar. And he said, what's that? I said, drumming. And so for those that don't know, I have a massive drum set. It would fill this room.
Understatement. Yeah.
Yeah, it would fill this room. 2 kick drums, 3 mounted toms, 2 floor toms, 2 snare drums, rides, crashes, the whole nine. And I play really intense metal, like really intense metal. And what I have found for me is that when both hands and both feet are moving somewhere around 300 BPM each, right? So I'm causing a minimum of 1,200 beats per minute with my body. All of a sudden, I can think. And I have the craziest music you've ever heard in my brain, loud, and both hands and both feet are flying. And now I'm problem solving. I'm thinking about, okay, what's our marketing strategy for September going to be? I need to call this guy about that thing. I should probably apologize to my wife about that. It's like I get into this zone, man, where like 45 minutes to an hour and a half will fly by, and I've got a good sweat on. I feel way better, like way about everything. Like the weight of the world has come off my shoulders, and it's like, oh, that was fun. And I got to play some jams. And so I'd be really interested to see what my brain is doing while I'm doing that, because even if you brought up earlier, the left side controls the right side controls the left. Well, both sides, both hemispheres, at least to a certain extent, have to be lit up because I'm using my entire body. Like the only thing that's even touching the ground are the tips of my toes. And that's touching my kick drum pedals. And so physiologically, my whole body's going nuts. It's controlled chaos. But in the controlled physiological chaos, neurologically, my brain's like, sweet, we're home now. Now we can do brain stuff.
There's a couple pieces to it. One is the brain scans. I asked my wife, I have a PhD as my doctorate, and I asked my wife,
Bragger,
I don't know, 5 years ago, but I was like, hey, what do you think if I went back and got my MD in psychiatry? The physical medical side. And I know what that entails. It would not be easy, but whatever, you just do it, right? And I got to give credit to her. She said, listen, I think you are smart enough and driven enough to do it. She's a nurse. She knows what it takes. She's been around them. She understands the hardship they go through to get there. She's like, I have no doubt that you're strong enough and smart enough to do it, but you will be single. And I was like, okay, so I don't have an MD degree. I'm not single. My hand's just swollen when I travel. Is why my ring's off. But that's not something I need to add another 15 years of my life to. I wouldn't be able to use it. But the brain scans, that always interests me. The reason I brought that up is it's a direct route to being able to do more of that stuff. So that was kind of the anecdotal side. Here's the two thoughts that I had about the drums. One is any bilateral stimulation. So technically different, close to each other, just apart from each other. Bilateral stimulation, both sides hemisphere, crossing the corpus callosum, right? Left and right hemispheres, left and right parts of the body. Any stimulation, any bilateral stimulation, we know is going to slow the limbic system, right? That's the biggest part of EMDR we've been able to show through brain scans. And so drumming, walking.
Yep.
How many times have you been told, like, man, go for a walk?
Yep.
Just go for a walk. And yes, there's things like maybe getting away from the situation, getting some fresh air, not being in the moment. But how many times have you gone for a walk and thought, oh, I know what to do now?
Yep.
Like, I got a pretty good grasp on this now.
They literally call it clearing your head.
Yeah.
Go clear your head.
Yes. Yeah. There's some things to getting out of the situation, maybe getting some fresh air, not being in the moment, being able to calm down, but there's some bilateral stimulation there. You asked if any done EMDR on yourself. I've always been leery to. If I did, I do have a friend who is an EMD therapist I went to college with, and she will, if she's had a crappy day, she'll do, it's what we call phase 2, which is that safe spot, and as you saw, it's not to trick your brain, that you're in a cabin in the woods or what. I swear 90% of people say the beach. So, everybody's on the beach, which is not relaxing to me at all. So, that's why it stands out. But, it's to kind of remind your brain you can do that. Like, it does give us some clear tools that we can use should you get to a place.
Yep.
But most people that come in my office, don't really need a lot of that. They've already proven they can get to a calm place because they go to crappy stuff all the time, right? But anyway, so that's a slower set. As you probably, it was a slower set of the bilateral. It was a lot slower movement, different frequency, a lot lower frequency. I've had my friend will do that on herself after a long day, and it doesn't necessarily. We don't believe it processes a lot of memory at that speed. But, it just kind of gets your brain to go like, all right, like, calm down, slow down, right? Here's the last thing I thought about with the drums is I think a lot of processing things, when you get yourself in trouble and you're not processing things because you're stuck on one side or the other, whether that's hemispheres, whether that's logic versus irrationality, logic versus emotion, most people are stuck in emotion, right? I mean, we see it. Gosh, we go on for hours about the world today and how it's stuck in emotion, and they're pissed off about things they don't even know anything about or has, anyway, that's another 3 hours. But most people are stuck in emotion, whether it's that we see, people do overreact, or come in my office and they're depressed, anxious, guilty. They're stuck. They're stuck in emotion, right? They've been through hard stuff before. They're stuck in the emotion on this one or this series of events or this life thing, or they're just stuck, right? So part of that is learning to be logical about it. Not saying it's okay, not saying it's not your fault, but being able to get the brain to go, I see this for what it is.
Yep.
This is terrible. This is a bad thing. Example I always use is, I don't think I said it here yet, is like 9/11 was horrible. I mean, every one of us know where we were standing when it happened, whether you saw the second tower or the second plane, or everybody's have a story. And we all thought, this is tragedy. This is unbelievable. There were people in this world that thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
The people that put that together, they thought that was pretty awesome. Right.
Yep.
If the event could cause your emotion directly, we'd all have the same emotion. It's not.
It's the filter.
It's the filter. Right. So if your filter is stuck in emotion, guess what disastrous, irrational, overgeneralized, self-defeating, catastrophizing, unable to handle, low frustration tolerance. Now you're stuck, right? As opposed to logically, whether you can think it through, whether it's exposure, whether it's EMDR, whether it's, and you can get to, all right, this is bad. I had a moment there. I was scared there for a minute, but we're going to be all right. This is a horrible thing. Man, even think back to just that story of the officer that had to deal with the kids,
Yep.
Nothing's going to make that good, man. That's a horrible event, right? He saw his own kid on the ground. But all of a sudden, he was not a piece of shit.
Yep.
Right? All of a sudden, that was really hard. And yes, we have some things to clean up maybe. But, so I'm not a piece of crap, though? We did the best we could. I know you've told me that 10 times, but suddenly I believe it.
Yeah.
You know? So I think, going back to the drumming, is there's a lot of thinking and a lot of artistry there, right? You're moving the pieces to hit the things that you want to hit.
Right.
It's also very artistic, right?
Yep.
And whether that's left, right, whether that's opening up different avenues, however the brain starts to see that, I think that's a lot of what bilateral stimulation does. Yes, it calms the limbic system. We've proven. Yes, it helps process memories. We've shown that. I don't know that we know the complete science behind it, but I do know when I think about it, while I'm thinking about it, it's kind of over here. Right?
Yeah.
For a short term, and I can handle it over here for about 30 seconds while this guy guides me through it. Right. Which is what you do on your own when you have something tragic. Like, I need to think about this for a few minutes, and now I'm going to go back to cooking dinner. You know,
Right.
And after a few times of that, you're better. But so I would argue that the drumming being both sides, you know, very artistic, also very controlled. I got to hit this thing at this time, and this part's coming up. And what you and I talk, because, you know, I drum not anywhere to your level, but, you know, I'm in a couple bands and with different instruments, and we were talking about that sometimes you'll put your heels down because, you know, that's like a slow part of the music. It'll just rest those couple of muscles for a minute because, you know, they're about to kill you with the 300 beats, you know, or whatever. That's not an artistic thing, I don't think. I think that's a logic thing.
No, it's highly technical.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
so now you got both going at the same time.
drums is math and motion.
Yeah.
Right. But
yeah.
And so you have to make your physiology do math and motion, but then how you do it, what you choose to accent, your timing, the phraseology of how you're playing. That's where the art's at. It's interesting that it's crossing that brain barrier.
I would say so. Yeah.
The big words that you said earlier, colossus, colostrum.
Oh yeah.
That thing.
Yeah. The middle of the brain.
The middle brain.
It's way easier.
Yeah, I just think of a sheet of paper in between.
Some people need more of it.
Actual last question for you. Do you see, with the efficacy of what you're doing with REBT, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, and EMDR, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing,
Yeah.
do you see in your experience, is there as far as efficacy is concerned, is it gender specific or Myers-Briggs personality type specific? Are there some people that it just doesn't work for? Because I know there's some people it doesn't work for. There's some people it does. But is there a way to stratify those people based upon the gender they were assigned at birth or whatever that bullshit term is these days?
Right.
And like A-type versus B-type, you know, ENTJ versus, you know, SFJ or whatever.
Yeah. There's probably a piece to that because some of that stuff will kind of, in an unscientific term, make you more hard-headed, right? I was talking to a very good EMDR therapist the other day, and you know, I have stressors in my life like everybody else, and sometimes it gets on top of me, and I'm doing pretty good. You know, I'm in a good place compared to 10 years ago, clearly, and she said, well, I think you need to come do some EMDR therapy, and I was like, well, if there's maybe one or two people I could do it with, it'd be you. Like, you're one of the ones. She used to work for Dr. Hurley and worked with a lot of soldiers and stuff. I think she knows her stuff really well. And I was like, if there's maybe one or two people that I would be willing to do EMDR therapy with, and I won't do it because I know every question you're about to ask me. And that's not because I'm great. I've just done this for so long. I have a feeling that 30 seconds into it, I'll go, she's about to say this, you know, just because, and it's not routine. The things that you ask and the cognitive interviews that you ask are different for everybody, different every time, but I'm already thinking those things myself, you know? So I think there are some personality things that could probably get in the way. Here would be my real statement though. And I'll even tell you how I got to it is, Dr. Hurley, my longtime mentor, wrote a book, and one of the chapters towards the end, it says, I've learned so much in this book alone, much less him, but one of the chapters says, when EMDR doesn't work, and in parentheses it says, for some therapists, right? I think it's more therapist specific than it is client specific. Now, The caveat to that is the EMDR world's going to hate this when I say this. I think it's massively overused sometimes. I think it is for maladaptively processed and unprocessed memories. Now, that may be PTSD, that may be tragic events, that may be you've just hated yourself for 20 years, right? It doesn't have to be 9/11, right? It absolutely can help with lots of things. Bilateral stimulation, we learn more and more. The AIP model, which is what runs the whole thing, we learn more and more about. I do believe that there are therapists that use it because it's just their go-to. And when it doesn't work, they go, oh, well. Man, I was at a seminar one time. This is probably 7 or 8 years ago now. And it's a great seminar. A lot of people get a lot of help from it. And they brought in this EMDR therapist that's supposed to be like the bee's knees, man. Like, it's just Mr. Magical. And I don't know anything about him personally, but I met him. And one of our cop clients had been in a shooting. Actually got shot in the vest. It went through his badge. It's kind of a famous story out of Louisville. And he goes around the world, tells his story. So I'm, it's nothing private. He carries the badge around, shows it to people, and it reminds them where their vest and so on. And he says this in public forum, so I'm comfortable with it. And he said, yeah, I went into that EMDR session with that after I told my story. And he said, hey, bring up that story. And he waved his hands back and forth a couple of times. And he said, I don't think you're a candidate for this. If you're an EMDR therapist, you just lost your shit.
Yeah.
That's not how this works.
Yeah.
There's a reason that we reactivate the memory. There's a reason that we do certain things, right? And I don't know him as a person. I've never been in his therapy office. I'm not going to knock him. But yeah, it didn't work because you didn't do EMDR, man. You waved your hands with a bad memory, which sometimes you'll pull off. Hey, bring up that really bad thing and follow me, right? So that, and then I'll tell you this last piece to kind of answer the question too.
That's like the people that stop drinking soda and lose 30 pounds in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It happens, but it's very freaking rare.
Yeah, it's not the norm. Yeah. Something that, what else did you do? What else did you stop? Like, were you drinking 40 a day? Then maybe, all that sugar. So I just trained in EMDR. I've been a therapist for a couple of years. I trained in EMDR. God, this is going to work. This is going to be awesome. This is exciting. I remember my very first clients was a local fireman. And for somehow he hears this, he'll know exactly who I'm talking about. But he comes in and he was actually dealing with like a divorce, just life problems, divorce, and he's got a teenage kid, and his life was kind of turned upside down, and he had some military service. He had kind of a rough childhood. He remembers parents fighting and stuff, but man, I do this great intricate history, and what I'm supposed to do, by gosh, is intricate history. And we talk about the divorce. I ended up helping him with a lot of stuff. That was more like life stuff. But man, I was EMDR trained, so I'm like, all right. So you said when you're about this divorce, you're feeling like, makes you feel not good enough, like like you're not good enough. He's like, yeah, it's hard. And I said, when's the earliest in your life you remember feeling that way? He's like, man, I got this story. I remember when I was like, I don't remember the age, like 8 or 10, and my parents were fighting again. They sent us both out to the truck, to sit in the truck, and I could hear them screaming in there. And I wish I had been big enough to go help my mom,
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, dude, that's everything comes back to that moment, because it's what I'm thinking at the time, right? Like, oh my gosh, that's why you feel not good enough in your divorce, right? And so we do EMDR. About 4 reps into it, I'm like, what do you notice going on? He's like, nothing really, just nothing. I was like, oh, did it change the memory though? Like, I'm really grasping, man. I'm new, and I'm like, and I'm panicking at this point, kind of, duck on water kind of panicking. I'm like, oh shit, what a waste this all was. I knew it. I knew this was stupid, And we do about 4 or 5 sets or whatever. And he's like, no, I was like, all right, well, and I made up some reason. I don't remember. And so I called my consultant, Dr. Hurley, and I told him this. He goes, why'd you use that memory? And I was like, because it's like the touchstone memory, man. It's the time that he felt not good enough. He's like, yeah, but he's over it. And I'm like, he's like, did you ask him how he feels about it now? And no. So he comes the next week, and I was like, how you feel about it now? He's like, it sucked.
Yeah.
It's not unprocessed. He processed it. Just because it's a trauma or a bad memory doesn't mean it's affecting your entire life. Right. Maybe there's a snippet in there of the filter we could talk about, that he was feeling not good enough because he was in the middle of divorce after so many years.
Who'd have thought?
Let's work on that.
Right.
It's not the end all be all. So I would say there probably is some things. I'll tell you one scientific one. We know that if you're you're taking and using at the time benzodiazepines, sometimes it'll block some of that. It's really the only drug we've ever been worried about, and not that it's specifically dangerous. Well, benzos can be dangerous in high doses. It causes more suicidality in people with more aggressive tendencies, like cops and firemen. And but there could be some blockage in there with the benzos because that's their job, as opposed to like an SSRI, SNRI that somebody's taken, kind of the more common psychotropic drugs. So there's a piece in there. So there is some scientific pieces to why maybe if you're schizophrenic, we're not going to take the things you're seeing away with some bilateral stimulation.
Right.
I might argue that let's look at the trauma and see how we got here.
Right.
But it's probably not. If it's a medical condition, it's not going to take it away. We're not going to cure ADHD or schizophrenia. Probably. Now, if there's some trauma playing parts into that, making it worse, maybe we can look at it. But I would argue that it is much less the client that's the problem than the person who didn't keep up with their skills or is new and doesn't feel comfortable in those kind of when you come out of EMDR training, you're like, everything's a car wreck and a 9/11 and like you can't wait for that car wreck to come in because you're going to clean it up in like one session, man. For me, that wasn't what they did EMDR on. They did EMDR on the downfall of my career and how angry I was.
Right.
And it was awesome, but it was pretty much a singular event. Yeah. Long event wrapped into one. So, I would argue on the book title of when EMDR doesn't work for some therapists. That's not to knock therapists. There are times that I've used it and gone, yeah, I got to work on that a little differently. I didn't know where to go there, but when you get really proficient at it, there's some other therapies out there that mimic EMDR in some way. And not only do they advertise themselves that they're cheaper and faster to train, I think that's a really scary thing to be cheaper and faster on.
I don't want somebody who's playing with my brain to have like taken a couple of shortcuts.
And you wouldn't know the difference going to them. Nobody would know the difference.
So tell people how they get a hold of you.
So pretty easily. So most of my information can be found at theangryvikingtherapist.com.
Theangryvikingtherapist.com.
Which is that name comes from college. I answered a question one day, and the professor was like, "Who was that?" Somebody said, "The Angry Viking looking dude." It just stuck. I trademarked it. It worked pretty good. But so the angryvikingtherapist.com or avt.help is the shorter one.
Okay.
I'm all over social media. I'm really not hard to find. I teach as a professor, and they love to find me in the first week and think it's pretty funny. But I can, you can reach out to me through Instagram or one of the other social media platforms. To work with me specifically, just go to the website, angryvikingtherapist.com. There's some options there for some monthly things you can do, which is an app that I created. You can get constant daily teachings from and respond to them. There's a community base to it, let them kind of learn as a group. There are also some one-on-ones. They're a little more expensive, but, I think the value is certainly there.
Worth making the investment.
I think so. I think if... we always joke that summertime is the slow time for therapists because it's really hard to be depressed on a boat with a beer in your hand, but you might have put your money into the wrong tool, So yeah, I mean, it's, I'll be glad to help anybody I can. If I'm not the right guy, if what I say resonates, but I'm just not the guy for you, reach out to me. I'll gladly point you to somebody that maybe I know is in your area, some resources where you can find an EMDR or REBT or just really good trauma-informed therapist. Yep. I don't have to be the guy. Yep. I like to help everybody that I can, but I am man enough to say, like, maybe I don't speak your language, but you like what you heard about the brain and about what's going on in your life. I'll gladly direct you in the right direction. I do tell people I can't do therapy through Instagram either, so keep in mind, we're not going to fix it through text, but I'll gladly help anywhere I can. That's the easiest way. The Instagram is Dr. Trevor Wilkins, Dr. Trevor Wilkins. Yep. Facebook is the same, so I'm not too hard to find.
Awesome. I'm thankful you're my friend.
I think so too, man. I appreciate you, as always.
All right, guys. That was episode 1 of the Bear Independent Podcast. Catchy title. We'll figure that shit out on the fly. I thought that was pretty dang good for having never done one of these before. I'm glad we popped our cherry with you. And you guys know the drill. Share the show. All the pertinent links are in the description. GrindstoneMinistries.com, CalebHouse.org, RefugeMedical.com, BearIndependent.com. I don't have any, CBD gummies to give to my guests on this show.
Oh, yeah. Hey,
But
what about like a brand new Sig Sauer pistol? That's what he's been giving out lately.
no, Glock. I don't want you to shoot your balls off, man.
All right.
Anyway, bless y'all. Shalom.